Yeah, we took that photo I've been waiting for. Oh, hi. So glad you dropped by. Since she's still going, where's your camera? I'm here with Dr. Klingon. I'm finally getting that photo. Perfect. Okay. Happy you could have to bear with that. We are on day number 3, Summit THRiiVE at THRiiiVE.com, Summit number 13, which we are committed to cleaning up so that you can get more of what we have created. It's Sunday at about 10 in the morning. Detox started last night. Okay, good. Link to it. We have somebody who's keeping track of it to make sure that you see this and can hear this well. Are you on, by the way?
I'm totally wired.
You're wired and good. Okay. He started last night, so if you're coming into this video, you're going to want to go to part 1, which will be a darker version of this. He's picking up where he left off yesterday. But bottom line, everything went to Dr. Klinghardt 10 or so years ago, more like 12 years ago, when I started looking up everything. I kept finding stuff about mercury toxicity and Lyme disease, and everything I would look at, it would lead to him. So he's still the cutting edge of what's going on. I try to warn people, however, that he's not where you start oftentimes, but you keep track of where he's going. So let's go back to Klinghardt.
So Dana alerted me that I have limited time today, so I want to kind of
you have a lot to get done.
Kind of organize it a little bit differently. So yesterday we stopped at the electromagnetic radiation. Here's sort of so far the most decisive study on it that shows that the random exposure of a child to wireless technology in the home, or even just having a cordless phone based on a DECT system, which is most of the cordless phones at home, causes severe and permanent damage to our proteome. That's the entirety of the metabolic enzymes, channel proteins, cell wall receptors, the whole bit, and the intracellular communication systems. So this is sort of the cell phone radiation gets at the core of what makes us alive and changes that. And then I talked yesterday about epigenetic changes put in motion through toxicity and through this very same technology that expresses itself 2, 3, and 4 generations later. And the effect of all the damage from chemicals and radiation is cumulative over generations. And the epidemic of autism that we have will predictably be based on several mathematical models, exponentially increase from generation to generation. And it is mathematically expected that by the year 2025, no more healthy children will be born if we do not change. The government knows these numbers, but has been paralyzed in action because the cell phone industry financially is now 4 times stronger than the pharmaceutical industry. And no politician can be elected or stay in office without the sponsoring from these industries, and therefore the government in the democratic Western countries is unable to take political action based on the science that's available. And so I'm here just to say that needs to come from the people. It can come from the top, the change that's needed. So a few studies. Here's one that shows the severe influence on behavioral problems in young children exposed to wireless technologies. Here's a study that shows that the exposure to wireless technologies causes inflammation in the body and allergies. And if we are right that autism really at the base, why it's still progressing, is inflammation, and the brain is one of the basics. And the food allergies and environmental allergies that we see are contributed to or caused by wireless technologies. We need to protect the children. It has less of an effect once a person is fully grown, and the smaller we are, that includes the fetal stages, the more vulnerable we are. The science on this is very well known now. There has been absolutely no political action on this. I'm going to skip over a few things. maybe the study from Roger Chantigny that shows basically in the on the scale here from here to here is the distance from the cell phone tower, and shows the severe symptoms, the severity of symptoms that people have once the cell phone tower is brought in the neighborhood is a severe issue. I give you the list here on the next page. So the worst one is daytime fatigue, and the second one is sleep disturbance. I'm just going to stay with those two. Yeah? There's almost no adult today that has no complaints about either daytime fatigue or lack of zest, or has no sleeping problems. Yeah, so in my practice, it's the most common complaint are those two, and those are the two #1 complaints caused by having a cell phone tower in the neighborhood. We have a blanket covering of the US now of cell phone technology, and so there is virtually no place where you can go where there is no coverage, and as long as there's coverage, your cells get rattled 24/7, and depending on your genetics and on your socio-economic background, your nutrition, childhood trauma, you may tolerate this a little bit longer or not. But the fetus that grows in the womb of a woman today is not protected by any of this. So,
and that's meters from the tower.
This is meters. Yeah, this was even 300 meters, which is it's about 1,000 feet. And so from it, there's still significant effects on fatigue and insomnia, and the list down of all the other complaints, including pain. So what are the sources of electrosmog? We don't have to go through it too more, but carrying the cell phone in the pocket, decreases people's testosterone, has a huge effect on the ovaries, crippling the eggs that are in there for generations to come, because the same eggs are the source of the eggs of your children if they're female, and that effect from generation to generation is cumulative. The Bluetooth technology, of course, the computer being in wireless mode is today the most devastating thing, especially having it close to the lab. That's why they call it laptops, and especially if it's a pregnant woman, having that against the laptop pretty much guarantees that your child is going to be, if it's going to make it through the pregnancy, it's going to be autistic. So there's a few things that I can tell people now. If you want to have an autistic child, I can tell you exactly what you have to do. The smart meters on the house, they send between 6,000 and 12,000 times a day wireless signals throughout the house, blanketing the house with a volume of radiation that's much stronger than what your cell phone or cell phone tower ever will do. We had many cases of people getting rapidly ill when these things were installed on the outside. People just stopping being able to sleep. People going virtually insane, and it had the first case of death was a patient that I kept maintaining for many years with Parkinson's, who was doing excellent. Suddenly had the downturn, died within 6 months, and it turned out that the downturn came a few days after the smart meter was installed. And so we're leading a campaign against that. There's a very good video documentary out. There's many sources of it. There's ways you can legally protect yourself and have the things deinstalled, which is now valid in every state. This technology has no value whatsoever. It's not saving any money. It's not saving any. It's not making the energy grid any smarter. So it's a dumb meter, not a smart meter. Wi-Fi routers in the house are cell phone towers. The small cell phone towers that you install in the house, ready for self-destruction of everybody who lives in the house. And then there's the DECT, the normal cordless phone in the house, and of course the baby monitors. This is just a small selection of how we can self-destruct. And if you buy these technologies, it's going to know, that it is not just affecting you, but if you plan on having children, and propagating your cell line forward in the future, you're out of luck. You're setting a course of destruction that will express itself more and more severely generations down the road. Your punishment is that as a grandfather or grandmother, you will have to take care of autistic grandchildren, and some of you who listen to this know what that means. Or you are those grandchildren. Here a little bit a summary from Henry Lyme. He is a professor in my hometown in Seattle that sums up what's so far known about the cell phone technology, the biological effects, goes from genetic effects damaging the DNA, cancer, molecular effects in the cell, electrophysiology changes brainwave patterns, behavioral problems, nervous system problems. It opens the blood-brain barrier, so toxins that normally would not come into the brain will come into the brain. It's a huge issue in autistic kids, is the blood-brain barrier not being functional. The blood-brain barrier forms completely only at the 18th month of age. So before the 18th month of age, any toxin that's in the circulation of the mother, in the breast milk, or in the food will enter the brain of the child and usually stay there for life. It may thin itself out, but the brain isn't growing that much. Probably you notice that the brain of a newborn baby is almost the same size as the adult, and the skull is the slowest growing thing in us, whereas the body, quintuples in size or so. The skull only, expands maybe to 1.5 times the size that it is. So the poisons that are in the brain by the time you're 18 months old don't get diluted through cell division very much. The other things are listed here. You can look at them. There's very good websites now that compile the literature. I like powerwatch.com, but there's many others. So a little bit about what can you do to protect. So first of all, rule number 1, get rid of all wireless technologies in the house. It's not difficult to get Ethernet or broadband. We advise parents to switch all fuses off at night to get rid of the ambient electric fields that are in the house. Daytime, we like parents to use the Stetzer filter. Graham Stetzer is a physicist who developed a system to clean up the electric grid in the house to get rid of what's called dirty electricity. It gives the field in the house a much more harmonizing, healing effect. And then last but not...
We do a quick now on the Stetzer filter. We've had a couple challenges.
Yeah, oh, wait.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just first do this, and then I expand on that. And then at night, the child should sleep under what we call the sleep sanctuary. It's a silver-coated cloth that is draped over the bed that reduces the incoming cell phone signals and radar and other wavelengths significantly and creates a state of relative electromagnetic peace in the house. This thing, however, requires that people switch off the fuses at night. It will work as an antenna for the ambient electric fields in the house if the fuses are still on. And so this is a very misunderstood technology. And also, if you have neighbors underneath you that have electric wires in the ceiling for the lights and so forth, you also need to shield on the bottom. And this does not protect from geomagnetic stress. That means if you're on one of the Earth's cracks where radiation is coming through, it does not protect from that. In fact, may make that worse. So we have a variety of ways of testing for that. They are very accurate to give the child a protected sleeping location. So let me sum this up. We have daytime technologies. With daytime, yes, you leave the electric system on in the house, but you use the Stetzer filters. There is an instrument called the Stetzer riser where you can measure the field strength of dirty electricity, and you need to kind of, according to that, strategically place these condensers in electric outlets, and it works beautifully if it's done accurately. That is not good enough for the nighttime. Nighttime we require, if there is a neurologically impaired child in the house, that all the fuses are switched off, including the one for the fridge. When the fridge engine goes on, it creates infrasound. That means the whole building vibrates with that. And that frequency alone has been shown to can cause cancer and neurological dysfunction in kids. And therefore, we want the fuses off. The only excuse is if somebody is on a breathing apparatus in the house, like a grandfather who has got emphysema and can't breathe, and is depending on some sort of electronic oxygen delivery, or if you have an aquarium. But if you have an aquarium, I suggest you get rid of it. If you have an autistic kid in the house, you have to choose fish over the child.
And go overnight without the bubble.
It depends on the fish. It's a temperature. It's a temperature. It's a temperature thing.
Ah,
So,
Chris makes fun of you.
so Dana, you had a question regarding this stats of
Actually, two things. One, we noticed in our home, and with some kids, and the other came out of bottoms up. The sensor filters work in a cumulative way, meaning it doesn't matter where you plug them in your house. When you plug in the meter to get that high reading, as you plug them in consecutively, they reduce that reading cumulatively. So what they sometimes do is they make this sound that's unbelievably annoying to these kids on the spectrum, and you name it. So you think you're doing a good thing. So make the filters away from where your kid is, number one. Number two, Vicki Warren talks about being able to use some of these rounded surge protector strips. We haven't confirmed whether or not that would work, but because you can always, whatever item is plugged into your surge protector, if you turn it off, all of the ambient electricity coming from that is off too, so that's going to lower it. But the bigger one is we had somebody burned up and blew up in their house. We think it was a faulty filter.
Yeah.
So just,
but I think Dana, for the purpose of this course, let's not get lost in the details. Basically, the Stetzer filters are a physics-based solution that has good physics behind it, and it works. The children recover much faster, and many more of them, if this technology is used correctly. And there's a little brochure that comes with it. It's like 3 pages of reading. It's not a lot to do it correctly. And if you plug the filters in the surge protector, it does create a hum. So if you put the filters in the outlet, it does not cause the hum. So, sorry.
Just a quick comment. If you have a really challenged kid, it's better, in my opinion, during the daytime to have that child playing in a room where there is no electrical current going in, period.
Absolutely.
So you just turn off the breakers to that room.
Absolutely. If you can control the child and it is, or by its disability, confined to a space, the best solution still is to use the shielding paint on the outside of the house, shielding curtains, and have the whole house protected from the wireless. The wireless is a destructive, inhumane wavelength that's used as a carrier wave, the 2.4 megahertz. It is sterilizing large groups of population. It is a dangerous technology that should have never been approved, and it was obviously approved with a sinister purpose in mind, and I'm not shy to say that because we do have the proof of that. And so we need to protect ourselves. That's one thing, but we definitely need to protect anybody who is under 18 or 19 years old, because their brain gets permanently changed and altered by this. So, pesticides and insecticides, the poisoning of our bodies with them is of course a huge issue in autism. And I think the best study still today is this one from a physician in Mexico, a woman, I forgot her name. She basically went to a clean area, relatively clean area outside Mexico City where there was no pesticides, insecticides used, because there were Indians and nobody takes them serious, and so they were left alone for a while. And then she went to another area with heavy spraying of insecticides and pesticides, and simply asked the children to make a drawing of a person. And here on the left side you see a 4-year-old girl drawing a person, and this is in a healthy area, and then a 4-year-old girl making a drawing of a person in the area that was heavily sprayed. You see the disjointed brain right on the picture, the lack of symmetry in the brain, the lack of a visual image that is formed in the brain, the disruption of normal brain electricity and chemistry, and the same with boys. And why do you compare 4-year-old girls with 5-year-old boys? It's now very well known in pediatrics that today a 5-year-old boy is on the developmental level of a 4-year-old girl. That has to do because testosterone has a devastating synergistic effect with most known environmental toxins. By the time of entry in college, the average IQ of a boy today is 15 to 20% lower than that of a girl. And I hate to say that, girls, but it was 50 years ago, it was the other way around. So there is a death of the male worldwide in Western world, self-initiated, that we need to know. And if you're firstborn, you get 60% of the body burden of mom's toxins. And if you're firstborn and a boy, you're out of luck today. The firstborn that are boys are, in general, the most severe autistic kids. And the other ones that come in the shelter of the first one have a much better chance. So here's one of the many papers on glyphosate, Roundup, and I just read here the main sentence. The negative impact on the body is insidious and manifests slowly over time as inflammation damages cellular systems throughout the body. So the key of this is one of the many papers from Stephanie Seneff, who works at MIT. She's a professor there, who's pretty much linked autism to the use of Roundup. There's plenty of evidence on that.
So Dr. Seneff believes that glyphosate is bad, aluminum is bad, mercury is bad. Doesn't she feel that the glyphosate sets up a susceptibility in the gut? And when we all know when the gut goes, it's deleterious to the rest of the body. So that the glyphosate sets up a susceptibility in the gut rather than directly causing the autism.
That's right. Yeah, glyphosate is probably the most important initiator of the cascade of events that then we call autism. But without glyphosate, in countries where there's no glyphosate use, there's what you know, autism. And so there's a direct link with that. And Roundup should be banned yesterday. Everybody knows it. And there's many other things that should be banned as well. But I think for the purpose of my talk, I'd like to just give an overview. I just want to mention this is a big one. The microwave from the cell phone radiation is a big one. The glyphosate, amongst all the chemicals, has taken the #1 spot in recent research and literature, and also in our own findings. The good thing is that it's pretty easy to detox once you actually have your focus on it. We use Lee Cowden's laser detox for that one. Glyphosate you can buy in any store. It's free. Costs like a little vial, costs like $2, and that's all you need for the laser detox. And you can get the stuff out of the system very rapidly. It changes the whole equation.
And then, Dr. Klinkert, just to further validate what you were saying about college entrance requirements and things, and males not doing as well as females, the armed services are having a hard time too with finding a sufficient number of men as in years gone by, males who they can actually admit to the service.
Yeah, it's going to be funny when we have an all-female army, everybody in charge, everybody who requires intelligence in the army is going to be a woman. It's going to be a different army, I hope so. Maybe at first it's probably going to be, my understanding of women is going to be a more cruel army at first.
It will.
But then when it evens out, it's going to be a more humane army. It's just initially, the people that take position are usually the ones that have a lust for power. There's maybe a negative selection at first, but it's going to even out over time. I'm convinced of that.
Sorry, but why'd you leave us?
So here a little bit. Okay, what other toxins are involved in our children? Here's a study on fire retardants in Swedish women's body. They simply did fat biopsies, and you see that kind of again an exponential increase of fire retardants in the fat tissue of women. And when these women have a fetus growing in them, those cross the blood-brain barrier, those cross the placental barrier without any problems, and there is no blood-brain barrier in the fetus to cross, so it ends up in the brain, because the brain is full of fats and oils, and it has a love for that. Okay, here EWG, that's the Environmental Working Group, did some wonderful studies that are co-financed, and I'll give you one where I was actually part of. So this is a study on 10 newborn babies. They tested them for 413 industrial chemicals, and basically the least, I think the least a baby had was 167 and clinically relevant amounts, and so, and low doses that were found are more toxic to babies than adults, and so it's pretty clear, you know, the baby grows up in a soup of toxins in the female, in the womb of the woman, and the womb of a woman used to be a safe place. It no longer is a safe place. So here's a little bit on the list, but you can read that up on all the things that were found: hydrocarbons, mercury, dioxins. I'll show the study in a moment how chlorella extracts that from the fetus, basically, and then the PFCs. It's just really terrible. When you actually look at it, it's a sad state of humanity that we fail to protect the fetus, and we keep failing to protect it. There's actually not a single government voice out there that I know of. There's no political action on this since the studies came out. So here's a few, you know, that it just breaks it down, all the things that were found. And for the purpose of my talk, I don't want to go further. But then this was a study done in Seattle where I was donating some of my patients to it, and I just show you the results of it. So this is each one of these blue bars here is the content of fire retardants in breast milk. And so you see there's a mom here that has pretty good breast milk. That's the one I would like to drink. And this is the one you do not want to drink. Yeah? There's actually a threshold. Here's a darker black line. This is a threshold that the EPA sets when a fluid is so toxic you are not allowed to dispose of it in the toilet. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 20 breast milks are so toxic that you're not allowed to flush it down the toilet, but that's what your baby gets. You think about that, you know what that may mean. I was going to scoot over it because of the time. Phthalates are important. You know, when you drink out of a plastic bottle, the crunchy nice plastic, 50% of that is phthalate. It's not just a little bit, it's half the weight of it. And if the thing on its transport to the health food store where you bought it was exposed to light, to sunlight, or got a little bit warm, the phthalates leach in very, very big amounts into it. And so we have a test called the Environmental Pollutant Panel. It's very affordable. It's about $150 at a lab in Seattle where you can actually look at the amount that is coming out. It's a urine-based test. It, of course, shows only whether the person is able to detox. But you see, like we see on every patient that we ever tested, huge amounts of phthalates because it is so in our nutrition now and drinking water, and that nobody gets away with it. You also, you know, you see xylene and toluene. That's it's part of airplane gasoline. It rains down on us every day, and there's other issues. But for reasons of this talk, you know, the autistic kid or the normal growing up fetus is exposed to this stuff in the womb, and then breastfeeding exposes it further. And there is a big question mark: how safe is breastfeeding now? You know, so I want to put a plug in here. We have a system in my office called Preconception Healthcare. That's the Sophia Health Institute in Seattle, actually Woodinville near Seattle. And in preconception healthcare, we try to diagnose and treat these things before a mother gets pregnant, so that the pregnancy can be smooth and the child actually finds a womb that is nurturing and healthy for the child, and finds breast milk that is delicious and health-bringing and not death-bringing. And so I think in a modern society we all have to move towards that and step out of the denial that we are in a huge crisis. So what do? We have a protocol. I use the BioPure products that I helped design. There's a protocol we have for organophosphate. So glyphosate, Roundup is an organic phosphate. And it needs a good source of vitamin C, which we do with a rosehip, freeze-dried rosehip. It needs acai and pomegranate and plum have ingredients in it that are hugely detoxing of organophosphates. And there is a product that we named Deep Purple, because there was a band I used to like, and it looks like that. Vitamin E, glycine, and selenium are in the literature, and then we use a special type of auto-urine therapy. I'm not shy to say that here. Basically, the principle is this: in homeopathy, if you take a toxic plant and you dilute it often enough, it becomes its own antitoxin. A good example is Rhus tox. Yeah, it's made from poison ivy. Poison ivy gives you a bad rash. If you fell into poison ivy and you take a homeopathic dilution of it, of Rhus tox, it heals it very quickly. The same is true in your urine. You have all the toxins. I showed you the lab work that the person is currently processing, and you can make a dilution of the urine and take it as a homeopathic, and it will drive out the very toxins that are in you. We have a huge success rate with that. There's a certain rhythm we have that it will be on the website of the Sophia Health Institute. You can read that up. It's very easy to do. It takes 5 minutes to take the child's urine and make a homeopathic of it, and have the best, most accurate matching homeopathic detox agent that you can possibly find. It's a wonderful principle that, of course, I learned from some of my German mentors, all of which are under the roses now. But it's a principle that was used for at least 300 years in Europe to detox people, to help them to get through the big plagues and infections.
What range of ages you say after step 6 in the dilutions? Is that like 6 to 10, 6 to 12, or I mean, is it?
No, it's 1 in 5 dilutions. You take 1 part urine, 5 parts water.
Yeah, but you got up to age 6 and you say test an ART. I'm just wondering what kind of range. Is it going to be between 6 and 9, 10?
Yeah, no, 6 and 12.
6 and 12.
Yeah. Usually the highly environmental sensitive children will test on age 12, and then as they get healthier, when they're on age 6, there's cruising altitude. Then it's a home run. Yeah. But if you start with the age 6 too early, they get huge reactions.
Yeah. So it's the V dilutions you're talking about, 1 to 5 dilutions, yeah.
Well, we call them age because the total is 6 parts. In Greek, that means hexa. That's 6, and so we call it age.
Yeah, 1 to 6 solutions. Which solution do you find that works the best?
Well, we really use our ART system to test which one. It's usually most autistic children it's a 9 or 10. Okay. But it's like, if you don't know, if you can't test, if you just advise people over the phone, they start with the age 12, and about every 10 days, then they go after 10 days to the age 11, and another 10 days to age 10, and eventually hitting the target. And then when they get reactions, they get fevers, they get muscle aches, they start throwing up. When they have a reaction, you back off a little bit and go back in, and back off and go back in, and you don't go to the next lower number until there's no more reaction. Takes about 2 years before you can get to the age 6 usually. Yeah. But during that time, a lot of good things happen. They start speaking, they start smiling.
That's why we need to be doing this with laser detox. It would be faster.
Yeah, of course. But we try to be low tech, so people get a piece of paper in their hand and it's a home run. We like to be low tech on all this. Okay, now, before Dana shuts me off, I want to talk about aluminum. Aluminum has emerged, as you will see in a moment, as really one of the major overlooked factors in autism and in chronic illness as a whole. it's important that you know that glyphosate is a chelator. Roundup is a chelator and very specific for aluminum. Glyphosate binds aluminum that's in the GI tract or wherever it finds it, binds it and drags it to the brain. Yeah, that is really important to know, because without aluminum, glyphosate wouldn't be as toxic as it is. But the interesting thing is, as you will see in a moment, that the same company that produces glyphosate also produces the aluminum compounds that are sprayed on us, which creates a bit of a sinister picture. Important is to know, first of all, the synergistic effect between aluminum and mercury. There's no mercury-free person on the planet. You know, even in the high streams of the Himalayas, there's mercury in the rivers now from the fallout, from the rains that they get. And then it's important, just as so you understand the rest of this, when we inhale aluminum, we have absolutely no biological barrier for it to go into the brain. Yeah, when we eat aluminum from the frying pan, it has very little damaging effect. We absorb very little, taking the glyphosate out of the equation. You know, with glyphosate, it does matter. But without glyphosate, we can eat all the aluminum all day long. It won't make us toxic. But the moment we inhale the smallest amount, we get highly, highly toxic. And I'll show you the proof of that, why that's important. And then it's important that when we detox aluminum, this is, for me and my work, has been the biggest factors in decreasing inflammation in the body. More than any other method that we know, including the Boswellia, including other things, reducing aluminum has been the one where the highly sensitive CRP comes down, where the fibrinogen comes down, where all the inflammatory markers, including TGF-beta1 and C4A, C3A, all the things that we do, we can struggle for years, you know, doing the mold programs or the other ways of bringing inflammation down. The moment you detox aluminum, the inflammation comes down. So let's assume that's all true. And just here very quickly, here's Boyd Haley's study on the synergistic effect of mercury and aluminum. Yeah, so we struggled, for me and a couple of other guys, we struggled in the 90s to get mercury out of the vaccines. You know. The result was, yes, we succeeded for most of it, except a few. You know, the hepatitis B still has it, and the tetanus shot still has it. But for most of the vaccines, it was removed, at least to a degree, and replaced with aluminum hydroxide, aluminum compounds. And so Boyd wanted to look at, well, is aluminum dangerous or not? So this is a cell culture, and here's basically the aliveness of the cell culture. Down here is death. Here is really healthy. Stop it. And this is time. Here's 24 hours. So control group, if I put brain cells in a culture, you know, after 24 hours, they're still pretty alive. If you bring mercury on board, that looks different. That's the black round dot. You know, when you bring mercury, expose the culture to clinically relevant amounts like you would get with a vaccine. After 24 hours, you know, like 35% of the cells are still alive. Significant death. Then, and this was how aluminum was approved. You know, then they looked at aluminum. It's this one here, the triangle. So here, look, that looks pretty good. Aluminum is really a lot better than mercury. However, when you put them both together, you get this curve here. After 24 hours, you got absolute death of everything to do with brain. Now, if you vaccinate children, most of the vaccines still have traces of mercury in, enough to fulfill this criteria. And if you add the tetanus in or hepatitis B, you certainly get this one. And therefore, of course, we need to force families to do the hepatitis B along with the other vaccines to make sure that this happens, because we want to dumb down the population, and otherwise we won't succeed in that. So, just briefly, a couple of papers on the role of aluminum in Alzheimer's disease. Yeah, downregulation of neuronal protein metabolism through aluminum. Nanomolar aluminum induces pro-inflammatory changes in human brain cells. And then a little bit about detox. this name here is a big name. John Exley in England is the main aluminum guy that we found. So the HPV vaccine has aluminum in it. It's not very nice. I put here that our children be dumb and tired. So the long-term persistence of vaccine-derived aluminum hydroxide is associated with chronic cognitive dysfunction. What does that mean? Well, if you want to raise children that have chronic cognitive dysfunction, such as autism, add just a little bit of aluminum to the vaccines. Yeah? And so there was a study that kind of, to make sure that that happens, you know, we had to put aluminum in the vaccines. And then, interesting, I found this one here, a role for the body burden of aluminum in relationship with chronic fatigue syndrome. I see people with chronic fatigue once in a while. I've tried everything for 30 years. Detoxing aluminum is king. And I show you in a moment why.
Yeah. There's one more important thing I haven't heard you say. That, you know, all the chemtrails have massive amounts of aluminum.
That's where it's getting to.
Yeah,
That's the punchline.
Oh, sorry. But the other part is the most of the major toothpastes on the market in the United States have large amounts of aluminum. It's the inert ingredient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But remember, you know, when we eat aluminum, it really has much less devastating effects than maybe inhale it. So let me read you through. So then I looked, okay, what's in the literature? You know, all of us are against vaccines, but is there actually, do we have a scientific base? Is it so evidence-based? And, you know, when you just do superficial, I'm not great at searching stuff on the internet. In fact, I hate it. I don't like being on a computer, but just searching for half an hour. Vaccines containing adjuvants may be associated with an increased risk of autoimmune inflammatory adverse events. Well, I've seen people once in a while with autoimmune disease. It's not like one patient a year. It's a little bit more than that. And inflammation in children, pretty much all of the ones that make it to my door have inflamed brains. Could it be the aluminum? Then I looked at, okay, what were the safety studies done to approve aluminum to put in the vaccines? And the wonderful thing I found is there isn't any. Nobody's looked at, is it safe? Yeah, so here's a nice publication, Trends in Immunology, very well-respected journal. The lack of accessible knowledge pertaining to the bio-inorganic chemistry of aluminum adjuvants. These authors tried to look at, well, what led to the approval of the aluminum in the vaccines. There is no research, not a single paper written anywhere that shows it's safe. So it's like, hey, if you want to get a homeopathic approved, we need to show it's safe. But to force a vaccine program on the whole nation, on the whole Western world, not a single safety study on one of the main ingredients, strange. And I'm just an outsider to the thing. So here's some of the earlier studies. Mark and David Geyer, you know, he was Mark or David, the dad lost his license, you know, based on his campaign against the vaccines, but he published some very good papers, actually reviewing the downside of the vaccines. I'm not against vaccines officially. So now is how do I get to the aluminum? Well, we started using a new detox system that currently only is available in Germany called Toxin Apharesis. It's a filter system where all the blood is taken out, put through a filter, and then put back in, and the filter can be designed specifically to take organophosphates out, to take heavy metals out, to take inflammatory cytokines out, and then you get wonderful lab work of the filtrate that comes out. Filtrate looks like this. It's a little bag at the end of the 3-hour procedure that where the inside looks like something the dog brought home, or the cat. And when you open it, it stinks like poop. Yeah, and it was in your blood before. And then it can be analyzed to look at what's in there. And so, I don't know if you can see it here, but what we found in there were astronomical amounts of aluminum and strontium and also increased amounts of barium. I just want to put this in relationship here. Here is somebody's blood, one of my close American friends. Aluminum level is 120 micrograms per liter. Lead 0.9, cadmium 0.2. This is just for you to see the relationship. When you do hair analysis on this person, it will show the lead, it will show the cadmium, it will not show the aluminum. Aluminum does not show up in the hair analysis. It doesn't show up in the urine challenge tests. It doesn't show up in the poop tests. Aluminum is locked into our system and has to be removed specifically and with other means other than the ones that we have available. This is 140 times more than the next highest level of metal. 140
the other
times
metals
more.
are really, those are about ambient blood levels for cadmium. What's the second lead? What's that?
This is lead.
Lead. Oh, that's much lower than your, well, it's a little lower than your blood level. But the aluminum, you know, that's 20 times higher. So you're really getting a good filtration.
Yeah, and we have now over 120 cases, and the same picture with everyone. Aluminum approximately 100 times higher than the next highest level, 100 times higher. And nobody knew this because we didn't have a method to detect it. Nobody knew it. This is completely new knowledge also, and you have to know we did the autistic kids. We have the first kind of older kids, 8, 9-year-olds that went through this. Their levels of aluminum are 300-400 times higher than the next highest metal. And we've been focusing too much on the mercury and too much on the lead and not enough on the aluminum. That's sort of really all I want to say here. So where does it come from? Well, why doesn't it show in the lab? Because this is not macro aluminum, this is nanonized aluminum, single atomic aluminum that doesn't cluster together, and the current detection methods in the blood or other methods don't show it. So here's where it comes from. You also see the plane kind of spraying something. You know, here's the engines. The only place where there's no spray is behind the engine, so it comes off some separate installations. We get the skies like that. This is in England. It's particularly bad in the south of England. When you see these patterns, you know, and they're called persistent contrails is a proper term. Contrails, a condensation train, the vapor condensation after a plane should disappear within 30 seconds or at most a minute, no matter what the weather conditions are. And if it persists and then slowly spreads out and the sky gets gray and ugly, that's the chemtrail sky. And that's a mix, a sophisticated mix of aluminum, barium, strontium, mercury has been found in there, and lead, and plastic, nanoplastic particles upon which all these things are spiked. Similar to, you know, how you put self-hydro groups on silica, they're putting all these metals on tiny plastic pellets, and so it suspends them in the air longer. But the trouble is, whatever goes up must come down. And so here's a few more pictures of skies, you know, where you recognize there's an intentional pattern. And then those of you who still believe, okay, well, this is just, you know, normal from the airplane traffic. Here's a picture of my hometown in Berlin. You see sort of like how this stuff scatters out. Here is the pictures over the most pronounced prevailing chemtrail activist in the US is a man in California. I don't want to mention his name, but this is the spraying right over his house. It's right here where the densest spraying is. So they're trying to spray him to death. You know, like, so they killed all his plants. They killed all his, you know, he's got a large-sized piece of land on the mountainside, and they're virtually destroying his livelihood. And here's the idea of, okay, well, it still could be airliners, you know, it still could be, but look at this, right? So here's here's an airline kind of flying, you know, this is over Berlin, flying one way, and then the pilot says, oops, I went the wrong direction, and kind of went that way. But at the same time, his friend, the other pilot, you know, from Lufthansa, kind of went this way, and then said, oh shit, I made a mistake. Oh no, I need to go this way. Oh no, I need to go that way. Are these typical airline routes? Yeah, yeah. And then I have friends at Boeing, sort of who installed the tanks for this, and that's how they look like. So pictures I'm not allowed to show, but I'll show them anyway. So, yes, this is a normal installation in an airplane. I don't think so.
Hyperbaric chambers.
Right. And then we measured the soil and the air. So this aluminum in the rain, the EPA gives normal values of up to 0.5 micrograms per liter. And here's the values that we gotten, in the thousands range. California 1.61,000 times over the, well, this is actually 120,000 times over the allowable EPA limit. Nobody talks about it. And then, of course, we looked at, well, if it's in the rain, it must be in the soil. So we looked at the soil, and these are increases. This is not the natural aluminum in it. We're looking specifically for aluminum nanoparticles. This is 25,000 milligrams per kilogram, and then the grass growing on the soil has similar levels. This was actually did this in Norway together with Renzo. We looked at why the cattle there was failing in Norway, and the horses were starving even though they had grass to eat. And then we did the blood levels of the horses and sent them to a German lab that can do the nanoparticles. And the horses was amazing that it was still alive. But they were starving while they were eating because they were eating the toxic shit that was left for them. Okay, then I looked a little bit, okay, what studies did the company sponsor that makes a spray? I'm not allowed to disclose here because I got privileged information, but the same company that sells the stuff to the military and other private enterprises to do the spraying did actually sponsored studies to see what will happen to people when they actually inhale the stuff. And so this is just the conclusion. Aluminum nanoparticles can elicit a pro-inflammatory response and thus present a cardiovascular disease risk. Now, this was done largely before the program really started, and so it was like only when it was found out, oh yeah, we can give people heart attacks, then it was approved on a mass scale to do this. Here another one, sponsored by the same company, manufactured aluminum oxide nanoparticles decreased expression of tight junction proteins and brain vasculature. Yeah? Nanoaluminum can affect the blood-brain barrier and induce endothelial toxicity. That's all of our autistic kids. Alterations of mitochondrial functions due to nanoalumina toxicity. That's all of our kids have this. And then there is a wonderful British outfit, Acumen, that does electron microscopy of the blood organelles and cell organelles to look for toxic metals, and certainly found aluminum in the mitochondria. This is the scaffolding inside the mitochondria, the actin fibrils upon which all the Krebs cycle enzymes are organized, full of aluminum. So it's gone deep into us. A little bit about detox. Here, citric acid, malic acid, and succinic acids are alternatives to desferal. Desferal is the medical drug. It's a really lousy drug. We do use it short term, but it's not a good harmonious drug. And so we use malic acid. Actually, Lee turned us on to magnesium malate years ago as a great way of doing both malic acid to detox aluminum and to magnesium at the same time, so you get two for the cost of one. And it definitely increases fecal and urinary excretion of aluminum. We advise parents to do a squirt of lemon and water, and throughout the day have the kid drink lemon water. They get used to it very quickly and actually refuse other types of water. But the main ingredient to remove aluminum from the brain, from the central nervous system, is silica. And here are all the studies. There's this guy, John Exley, he's kind of everywhere in there, all the way to organosilicone therapy in Alzheimer's disease. Of course, it has to do that with the question mark, but it works absolutely beautiful to use silica drive the aluminum out of the brain of the kids. We use a product from Belgium that's available at the industry here. It's called Biosil. It's basically liposomal silica, but it's not done very well. That's why Chris is working on this for us to create a more tasty liposomal silica. It's not difficult to do. Yeah. So these guys just use phosphatidylcholine straight together with silica, and it smells like old socks. You know, it reminds me of my dad when he came home and was sweaty and had to put his feet up on the table. That it has that taste. You know, and but to get aluminum out of the system is not that difficult. It takes, you know, if you take a 5-year-old kid, it will take about 5 years to get the levels really significantly down. But it is so worth it and so overlooked and so unknown. Just by adding in 2 things: the lemon juice, maybe the magnesium malate, and the silica. It's a fantastic tool. In herbal medicine, it is horsetail tea, which we like to add in. And Umura did a study on cilantro showing that cilantro has phenomenal activity in driving aluminum out of the system. We like the children to have foot baths, you know, the ionic foot baths, and taking a lot of cilantro before. And then we check the urine, and then we can find real aluminum with a conventional urine test in the urine. So that works.
Matrix of the Omeo-K mark also has aluminum in it.
Which one?
The Omeo-K mark.
The Omeo-K merc is fantastic for this, yes, as a mobilizer. And here's the last bit, is a study that a friend of mine did in Germany by just giving the cilantro tincture that we're using at BioPure before the foot bath, and then collecting the urine afterwards, and doing this for a month, and doing the hair before and afterwards. And what you see basically with all of these are increases over baseline from where it was before. You basically see that you know, nickel gets increased hugely, cadmium comes out, cesium comes out, barium, lead increases, aluminum increases, strontium increases, mercury increases. Yeah, so it's wonderful. And then I don't have the second page, and we looked at the good metals. The good metals all say untouched. So cilantro, together with the foot bath, it works many times stronger to combine the foot bath with the cilantro. But the mistake was that we always looked in the water of the foot bath to see what comes out there. That was the wrong place to look. You have to look in the pee. And then actually the ionic foot bath is a very good idea. It's wonderful to do it with the kids. They love being in a foot bath. It's an exciting thing for them usually. So it's not it's not an extra burden like doing an enema, which I'll get to in a moment.
Just to throw a little bit more data, when I did look at foot baths, we just looked in the blood, my wife and I think 3 weeks in a row, before and after, and you'd see the blood levels of mercury come up. Inorganic more than methyl. Methyl came up consistently about 20%, and inorganic came up 30 to 50%. Each time it was like the same, you know, my wife and I had the same pattern each time. So it mobilizes from the extracellular matrix into the blood, and then you pee it out. And it was really, really consistent.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for doing that. Because that's, I think, you know, it's a pity that all these foot bath manufacturers do the stupid.
Oh yeah.
You know,
look at the water.
Look at the water, and you know. And
so it's quackery.
That's quackery. That's quackery. We're looking at the wrong thing, you know. So they're selling it for a good thing for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
If you were going to do your 9-volt battery foot baths for the people that want to do it economically, would you use silver electrodes, or what electrodes would you use?
I probably just use the plastic, conductive plastic pads, you know, that don't dissolve.
Oh.
So,
But the way that Richard has it, you actually put like a spoon or something.
Yeah,
He has a diagram.
You just use a steel spoon.
So what's that?
So.
Are we sure it's going to work the way those... I wouldn't trust that. I mean, you put those big electrodes in, and, you know, part of that game is them being sacrificial electrodes, and all of that, all those different gases being created there. I mean, that's a radical reaction going on there. And you're the one who turned me on of all that electricity being this autonomic nervous system modulator. And, you know, 2 spoons and a 9-volt battery, I'm not buying that.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's sort of believing that it's just the ionic current that you create, but with the foot bath, there's other things that happen. Maybe some of them even outside the known physics.
But I mean, it's a serious and big field you're creating with all those electrodes there on those good baths. I mean, that's a big field that you're not going to recreate with 2 spoons and a 9-volt.
But anyway, my recommendation to the moms is the focus has to shift to aluminum. We do not have a single lab in the US that can detect it. So you need to know that you're on your own with that. And just assume that it's there as long as you're breathing in nanoparticles of aluminum. Every kid, the healthy ones and the unhealthy ones, is loaded with aluminum. The unhealthy kids are the ones that can't excrete it at all, and they need this help. Yeah, so we just put every kid on it. The results are dramatic. They're effective. It works. You know, so, but let me do. There's one more section that I like to get through before Dana cuts me off.
It's Chris. You don't need the mic.
Okay.
You're like me. I'd rather not use it.
Scott, I need your help.
Can I ask you a
He's
question?
not responding to me.
And then he can repeat the question.
Oh, you don't need the
To the
mic.
next
No.
page.
Okay,
Just you, Chris.
Oh, just me. All right, Robert, you need the mic.
I do.
Amazing.
Here's the mic. I just have a couple of comments. You know, God is in the details kind of thing. You talk about aluminum. We talked about aluminum, the metal. And then we talked about alumina. Okay? And we have to pay attention to these details when we're trying to get rid of aluminum. I mean, alumina is aluminum oxide, Al2O3. So that's one thing, and I'm not sure I understand what we're faced with.
Yeah, no, the chemtrail mix is a complex mix of different types of aluminum, including metallic aluminum,
Aluminum.
1+, 2+, 3+, they're all in there. So
Okay.
it's a sophisticated mix of all of them.
Okay. And then the silica, it's interesting that silica, I know silica exists in the ocean primarily as orthosilicic acid.
Exactly.
You'll find this interesting.
That's the one we need.
And it's polymerized by algae in the ocean called diatoms. All of you know diatoms, and which may be why it's regarded in the health business. And it's interesting, when it polymerizes it, the term it polymerizes to what's called biogenic silica. Okay, and I don't know what the derivation of that is, but it's very
Biogenic just means it was life-derived. I mean, just like
Okay.
calcium chloride that's in coral is biogenic calcium, not
Yeah.
calcium chloride, but calcium carbonate.
So I wonder if there's any silica form in there, even in the raw oceanic form, that would have some aluminum binding capability.
That would be fantastic. I mean, we're not happy with any what we have so far.
Right.
That's why I put this guy on. Would you guys brainstorm that?
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you come up with
And
the
turn off the mic. And
with the alginate bound silica. Whatever, sort of that.
turn it off. Is it off? Okay.
Okay,
Back to
I'm
the
just going to
experts.
rush quickly through the
You're
so
okay.
the parasite thing, because I have something to say with that. You know,
Really?
so first of all, I start with some premise here that's again important. Now, the reason really I'm here is the biomedical approach in the treatment of autism was always dependent on lab work that can help people make the decisions. I'm not afraid to say that I use a certain form of muscle testing to explore areas where there is no lab test available. And so it allows me to find things before there is a lab test available. The alumina, we knew about it, but only when the apharesis came around we could confirm it. With the electrosmog, I've been teaching that for 30 years. It was already in my original ART program to look for that. Now there's instruments that confirm it, and now there's the studies that confirm the extreme damage from it. I want to take you through another area that has been overlooked, and that's the parasite area. And I start with the sentence, unfortunately, there are no reliable lab tests to rule out parasites, especially those that stray from the gut into the central nervous system and other tissues. Insiders estimate the detection rate to be less than 1%. So out of 100 people that have parasites that you put through the currently available test, you find it in 1. People travel, animals travel, food travels, and parasites travel with them. Also, the insect vectors have traveled north due to the real climate change. Vectors are everywhere: uncooked food, pet sex, mother to fetus transfer, husband to wife transfer, kissing, contaminated rivers, drinking water, and food can be found in every part of every Western country today. It's important that you know this. Every parasitologist knows it, but they're not allowed to talk about it. As a clinician, I have to say there's way more people being made ill by parasites than the lab work can show right now. So here's a wonderful article that looks at the literature from the 1910s through the 1990s, basically show that having worms impairs mental performance. That goes all the way to autism. Here, an article in PLOS, which is considered by many of us right now being the leading scientific journal. It gives us a lot of direction as physicians, and shows, first of all, that the 11 nuclear weapons, including the US, are considered the leading countries on the planet right now. Yeah. All have debilitating, parasitic, and other infectious diseases. We know about Lyme disease in this country, but we didn't know about the parasite illness. I get to that. And so parasites impair the child's physical and intellectual development, pregnancy outcomes, and worker productivity. Now, let's throw the autism in there, the intellectual development. And so, and here's a look in selected areas of poverty found in the US. Now, where are the selected areas of poverty in the US? Well, I looked it up. For example, Seattle is considered one of the more affluent cities in the US, but we have our slums in South Seattle, and that is the selected area of parasites, of poverty. And do you think, honestly, I mean, anyone listening to this, that, you know, people that live in that area of Seattle and they have parasites, that when they cross their part of town into the uptown, that they're going to be checked for parasites every day, so they're only allowed to travel there, if not? In fact, they're the food handlers in the restaurants. They're the people, they're the cleaners in houses. They're the people that actually fulfill very important jobs in any city. And so, yes, for the purpose of publishing a paper, they had to put it this way. Yeah? But for the purpose of truth, parasites are everywhere. And down the list here, the worm infections, Leishmania, Chagas disease, toxoplasmosis, and trachoma. That's the one that makes people blind. Okay, here is just to destroy the myth. You know, the Orthodox Jewish community doesn't eat pork, and yet here's a case where a large number of family members were found to have pork tapeworm cyst in their brain, or the one there were a couple of asymptomatic family members that only tested positive in the lab work, which is not even available to us physicians. We can't test any. We can't. The tests that are used in the scientific journals, we can't get them. Yeah. Have you heard of this mentioned here, Cysticercosis antibodies? I tried LabCorp. I tried the local university. We never heard of that. What is that? This is the top institution in Washington, you know, dealing with parasites. Cysticercosis antibodies. Sorry, sir. Yeah. So this is sort of where we're left. There is a disjointedness between what people have and what's available in the lab. Your battery is running low. Daniela, would you do me a favor? It's would you plug me in?
Come around this way. Actually, it's plugging this in.
Scott.
How come every time we have a problem you get Scott?
An engineer.
Every time our body's crashing, we yell, Chris!
Yeah, it's because the cursor's in the second.
I'm gonna
screen,
try to
probably.
put this Whoever else is plugged in, are you going to be okay if I unplug you? Are you fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take that.
See.
He's asking about the homeopathic remedy.
Is that, that's not a that. We need the, his credit.
Just
Yes.
work.
One of, well, he didn't mention it, but
You mentioned it.
it was called
Down.
Merc. I think
It's
that was
down in the
called
bedroom. I
Mercury
think it.
Homeopathic.
I think it's in my backpack, but maybe in the suitcase.
Austria. You can order it from Austria.
So
Okay, back, let's go.
here just
But it's also good for
for me an interesting case because I was peripherally involved because it was my patient that went all the way, found the way to into a medical journal. It was a patient presented, with breathing difficulties, coughing, got a chest X-ray. This one, the radiologist said this is lung cancer, so but the patient is not going to make it. And so what I arranged was, because with muscle testing, he tested for parasites on the lung. So I arranged that the patient be, before he goes down the chute of the cancer therapies, to do a biopsy, but not just sending the sample to the pathologist, but also to send it to the infectious disease people to look for it. And then this is what they found, is this. See something there? This is not a cancer cell. This is a microscopic worm. Yeah. And so we sent the patient on to the university, and he was treated with albendazole and made a full recovery within a few weeks of his lung cancer. Here are just a few names. What's most commonly diagnosed: roundworms, schistosomiasis is huge in this country. Strongyloides, also called Nictator americanus, the American killer. Yeah, nobody looks for it. And then rarely diagnosed is this one, the lungworm, or Strongyloides claphoui, and the ropeworm. And we get now into the CD thing a little bit, why that even would be important. Here are just some of the symptoms of chronic schistosomiasis: abdominal pain, abdominal swelling, blood in the urine, shortness of breath and coughing, weakness, okay? I have patients that complain about weakness, seizures, paralysis. We find all this in autistic kids. A lot of the autistic kids, and I want to say that in front of everybody, have schistosomiasis, have acquired schistosomiasis. It's subclinical. It does not get diagnosed in this country. But when we treat the kids for it, there's dramatic improvements. The approved drug for schistosomiasis is Pesticides. It's easy to get. It's a bit expensive. It's very well tolerated. There is an injectable form of it that is not available in the US for human use. But schistosomiasis is a reality in this country, and it's a reality in the autism community. And nobody has looked there.
Where does it live?
Schistosomiasis, well, it's known to live in the bladder. So as long as there's bladder symptoms, you want to suspect it. The kid pees frequently or holds their bladder. That's the number one thing I think of. And as I was able to predict this case with the lung cancer via Parasite, and we predicted, 30 years ago, Mercury being a major problem. So I'm predicting that schistosomiasis or a closely related parasite plays a huge role in autism. And of course, with using the CD enemas, we have some effect on it, but there's more effective remedies than the CD enemas to deal with that.
Yeah, schistosomiasis very commonly goes up into the kidneys and also into the liver.
Yeah.
This starts oftentimes in
We find it a lot in the liver.
Yeah.
Okay, so now scrolling forward, the rope parasite, most of you are familiar with it. We really don't know what this creature is, whether it is an adaptation to something happening in the gut. When I think I have it here, when we here's my little take on it. we cut like one of these beasts apart and send it to various labs, send it to a German lab, and they said, yes, it's definitely a parasite. We did some DNA testing on it, has parasite DNA in it, but it's not a sequence that we know and understand. So it's a novel parasite. That's what it came back. In a Russian lab, we sent it in. This came straight back, yes, that's a raw parasite. In America, American labs, different labs, we sent the same sample to. One came back as mucus, the other one as food residues, and the third one as shed gut lining. So 3 different diagnoses, 3 different labs in the US on the same thing. So we don't know what the beast is. We do not know, is it sort of like shed gut lining with some parasites embedded in it, or is the whole thing a creation of one parasite? I think it is a biofilm community of various things living in there, and the truth is, the patient is always better off with the thing out than in. So, but there's more to it, to the story. Yeah, and I'll get to that, and this is the main part of what I'm trying to convey. So there's these different things coming out. The patient sent us pictures of various sorts. There is some references on it. Now, here's the main part of my talk. Okay, if we have parasites, why do we have parasites? Why was it not a problem 30 years ago? Why is it a problem now? So here a couple of papers from biology, and I just highlight the big ones. Parasites as sinks for pollutants within their hosts. Some parasites are able to reduce pollutant levels in the tissues of their host. This is my main message to the whole autism community. The parasites are not our enemy. They're here as an adaptation to an ever-increasing toxic environment. And you can look at them as just an indicator of toxicity in that child, or you can look at it as a last rescue effort of life trying to save this child. Yeah. The battery is still very low. I don't know why it says that. So, I don't know, somebody may want to check on the other end of this.
Could be time to a light switch.
Yeah, it may not be plugged in at the other end.
It's just not plugged in at all.
Magic. So, here another one that looks more at the numbers, concentrations of some heavy metals compared to some of their hosts. So what they're doing is they're basically looking if the parasite concentrates metals from the host in the parasite, how high is the concentration in the host and how high is it in the parasite. The lead level 106 times higher than in the tissues of the host, cadmium 119 times higher. Here another one, lead 289 times higher in the worm than it is in the tissues of the host. 208, that's almost 300-fold increase. That means against an osmotic gradient, the worms extract metals from the host. And now, what is this used for in biology? It's used, parasites are used as a bioindicator for the pollution of a particular body of water or so. You know, how are you going to measure how toxic the Pacific Ocean has become? You can take water samples everywhere, you're going to test differently, but you take a whale, you put a diver behind the whale, you collect the poop, and the more parasites are in there, the more polluted the Pacific Ocean is. It's a very, very effective test now used in biology, simply looking at the parasite burden of a particular animal living in a particular environment. You know how toxic the environment is. The reason, and I make that here very clear, the statement, the reason almost all autistic kids have a huge parasite burden is because it's the last effort of life itself to save these children. Because the children have exhausted their defunct detox mechanisms. They can't detox. And the last effort they do, they grow parasites in themselves. at a cost. The cost is the craziness. The parasites have to establish themselves against the immune system. They have to secrete all sorts of immunosuppressive, immune-modulating substances that unfortunately also modulate the behavior and the thinking and the brain development and the neurological development. And so getting rid of the parasites is on one hand a very attractive idea, on the other hand a very dangerous idea, and I'll get into that a little bit more. So we looked at I noticed, and you probably noticed, there was no mentioning of aluminum. So me being on the aluminum trail, I wanted to know what the hell now with aluminum. So there is an international way to calculate by putting the results of hair analysis, urine, DLPS, desferal, and EDTA together, all the detox tests that are available, to come up with an estimate of body burden. Yeah, it's a complicated formula, so we did that, and then sent the raw parasite in to have it checked for different metals. And here's what we got: that the aluminum was 228 times increased over the body burden of the patient, and lead and zinc and magnesium was significantly less. And so what I'm postulating is that the raw parasite is the last resort to deal with the chemtrail poisoning in our children. They have to breathe. They're breathing in nanoized aluminum and other particles, and getting it out on the other end is a very intelligent solution. Every acupuncturist knows that the lung meridian and the colon meridian are linked with each other. So when the lung is overflowing with something, in some magical way, it comes out in the colon.
Hey, Dana.
Yeah.
I think you're needed.
Did it shut off?
I think that the valve isn't working.
Yeah.
I think his battery died.
Well, I guess that would be it for Dr.
It
Cleanups.
wasn't you you had to worry about. It was the battery.
I thought you were charging. How about we get your charger with you, and you just talk to us the whole way down? Because Daniela can't find it. Oh.
There you go. You plug back in.
Wait.
You plugged it into a power strip that wasn't plugged in.
Oh, there you go.
That's a doctor for you. No, so I didn't do that. Oh, wait, this is
Okay.
So we'll be back in a minute.
Way too many.
Either 57 or 1 plus the mom.
So
Wait, come back.
I just,
Thank you.
Something on that?
yeah.
Biofilm. I'm just thinking aluminum biofilm, which you said earlier. Are used.
You need a microphone.
Oh.
Repeat the question, Lee Cameron, please. Don't touch the blue.
Are you thinking what you said about aluminum right now with parasite? Are you thinking some of these other toxins in the environment, like glyphosate, which you mentioned earlier, are those going to be in the parasites as well 200 times? Are they bioconcentrating?
I'm absolutely sure that will be true, because in biology, you can, I just Googled heavy metals and parasites, you get like 50 articles on that. But if you Google, glyphosate and parasites, you'll find the equivalent papers to that. So, but the main thing is glyphosate drags aluminum deeper into the tissues than it would go on its own. It's a perfect storm. So, okay, how do we treat this issue? We stop the food behaviors and supplements that feed the parasite. I've become increasingly an enemy to the supplement industry. You take a multivitamin, you feed the parasite. That's so simple as that. Anything you take orally will first feed the parasite before it feeds you. That's clear. Sweet and processed food, mushy foods are great. All cooked and baked grains are great food. That's all in the literature. And then we never treat parasites without establishing a metal elimination protocol first. I know the moment I threaten or kill a parasite, it will release a whole slew of stuff that's in the parasite back into the system. And so we start always with enema and suppository protocols. BioPure has a product that's freeze-dried garlic and artemisinin, which I always start with, called Nexus. It's a suppository. Children accept it very well. It gets taken up by the enterohepatic circulation and cleans out the liver cells, the bile ducts, and parts of the small intestine, so it kind of rotates around here. We always start with that. We try to get the parasites out whole, undissected, undissolved, as a whole thing. And so we combine it with enema therapy. Initially it can be mild, it can just be coffee enemas, or just even water enemas. We just want the person to poop. We use your protocol, with the clean as to whistle and laxatives to try to get a movement going. And you should never attempt to kill parasites unless the person is pooping regularly, big, nice size, huge poops. If they're pooping once a day with their little deer pellets, do not attempt to do this. First you need the patient to poop.
In my 11-day detox, I do clean as whistle morning 2 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons at night, and they're pooping all day.
So we want the clean as a whistle is a fantastic product, super good stuff. So then we start, and it's important to know with the parasites, you want to start first with the milder things. They're going to kill what they're going to kill. If you give the strongest antiparasitic all at once, you're going to kill everything at once. You get a huge inflammatory autoimmune response to the dead bodies, and you get a huge overwhelming release of toxic metals. In fact, we've seen metal levels when we just do the normal challenge test after a parasite kill. They were so scary high that we realized we can kill somebody with a good parasite treatment from the release of environmental toxins that happens. And so this is sort of how I got to the CD enemas. To keep the long story short, we start with suppository treatment. We start with clean as a whistle to get the kids to poop. And then we start with the milder enemas, first water enemas, maybe with salt in it. And then we're graduating them, and then we do the CD enemas. And see and watch, simply lean back and watch what comes out. And as long as there's whole strips or growth parasite or other things coming out, we're quite happy with that. And we're not going to add
they don't lyse and release.
They don't lyse and release. So we want the whole thing come out. And I get into that sort of. And then when we graduate from that, then we add in the liposomal artemisinin. We have there's a product from BioPure that I use. Kokusin. It has a lot of ginger in it and curcumin combined. Ginger is the most natural antihelminthic drug, and Mimosa pudica is for the threadworms and for hookworms a fantastic remedy. It's a fern that's very powerful, and we make that whole thing liposomal. That means we throw it in a blender together with phospholipids. We're waiting for your phospholipid because it's clearly superior to what we have. It's a fantastic tool. Chaga, we use chaga is a fungus that grows on birch trees. We used the American chaga and then found the original Siberian chaga that the shamans in Siberia have used for thousands of years. It's a fantastic dewormer. It's also the only drug that we know that treats Lyme disease, Babesia, Bartonella, Mycoplasma, and worms all in one. And it tastes nice, tastes like coffee, when you drink it. And it has become my favorite medication for the whole group of illnesses that we have. And it has been the favorite amongst the Siberian shamans for at least 12,000 years. There's literature, there's cliff drawings and stuff that they used that stuff 12,000 years ago as a main antiparasitic. And then we do that, and then we graduate and may add in the medical drugs that I mentioned yesterday night. It's important to know there's only 2 medical drugs that cross the blood-brain barrier, 2 antiparasitics. One is Alinea, the generic name is nitazoxanide, and albendazole, Albenza. Very inexpensive in Mexico, very, very extremely expensive here. Those are the only 2 drugs that we know that cross the blood-brain barrier, and that should be the last step. We have fantastic results with seizure disorders in kids. In fact, I don't remember a single child with seizure disorder that still has it today because of my parasite treatment. It is the cure-all. Yes, we may use some CBD oil now or some other things that are known to shortcut the longer wait. But if we do the enemas first until nothing comes out, then we add in the natural antiparasitics, then the medical antiparasitics, and then at the far end, we do the ones that cross into the brain and clear out the brain. It's dramatic, the results in autism, and has been, as a single idea, has been the most effective way of dealing with it. But I do want to, at the end of my little talk here, stray into what do we do to prevent the release of metals. So that's of course like something, but before we do that, the Gubarev protocols are absolutely beautiful for the children. Gubarev is a Russian scientist who patented various enema treatments, and the first one that he does is whole milk with, now it's 4 tablespoons of salt. And the funny thing is, parasites love milk, and so they stray from the tissues outside the gut back into the gut to drink the milk, and they cannot smell salt. And it's like putting salt on snails. Salt sucks water out of them and paralyzes them, and they come out as a whole. And that is exactly what we want. And so Gubarev always starts with that. And then the next one, 4 days later, is to use baking soda in water. And then when there's nothing coming out with this, every 4 days you do it. And so if the first one is successful, something comes out, you stay with it every 4 days until nothing comes out. You get 1 stage of parasite development. Then you move on to stage number 2, that's the salt. Then you move on, the baking soda. Then you move on to stage number 3, which is really the most powerful. Is using both boiled eucalyptus leaves and eucalyptus oil, the essential oil of it. Now these are, they keep you busy for 4 or 5 hours. So these are not, they're easy to do. There's no huge cramping and side effects or anything like you get with the CD. There's none of that. But it's a whole day, But it is the most valuable day of the life in these children. So, and then the last one is vinegar and water. To get the breeding place of the parasites out, which is on what's called the fecal stones. That's sort of where the things breed from, whatever that creature is. So there's just a little bit about that. Then chlorine dioxide, various protocols, but we've actually, I like it. I like the chlorine dioxide. I do not like it orally. I think it's a mistake. I think most kids in my hands do not tolerate it. Most adults do not tolerate it. I think there's far better things you can do from the top down. But from the bottom up, I feel that chlorine dioxide is the best, the strongest, the most reliable, and the most simple. And so I like it. We have good results with it. And we do not, I do not use Kalka's mebendazole protocol. No, mebendazole that he uses in his protocol on the full moon, new moon, is the weakest of the antiparasitic drugs. That has a place in it. Weak is good, but we do much better with the herbal variations of it, and then move on to the strongest antiparasitics, which is Pesticides. By the way, is a surfactant. Pesticides is a fantastic biofilm breaker, and we like to combine. Once we get into the medical drugs, we like to put small doses of Pesticides on board twice a day, and then the big hit, with the antiparasitics. But I get to this, you never do this unless you cover for heavy metals. And so we use the binder from Chris Shade. I use the version of BioPure has. It's called THRiiiVE. It's a combination of silica spheres bound to sulfhydryl groups spiked attached to silica spheres. A huge binder in the gut, the most effective of all the binders for mercury, lead, for all the sulfhydryl affinitive metals. We put people on a pretty high dose of silica for the expected aluminum onslaught. I put people, if they're tolerated, on high doses of chlorella and zeolite.
Is that the biocell for the silica? Is that what you're using?
Yeah, currently, but we're not quite happy with it. It's good, but it's not. We need the alginate bound one. We use alginates. We use Chelation if it's testing. Charcoal we use only for the crisis. Yeah? If the patient enters a healing crisis, that's charcoal time. And I don't care if it's charcoal made from bamboo, like that's very popular now, or simple charcoal made from whatever is burned to make the charcoal. It needs to be activated charcoal. That's as a binder. And then, but we still need to have the mopping up stuff in the connective tissue. And I still use DMPS and DMSA. They're fantastic drugs. If you use them in context with all the other stuff, it's still most effective in the literature. Nothing has ever superseded DMPS, in terms of binding capacity and the dynamics of it. And the good thing with DMPS or DMSA is none of them cross the blood-brain barrier, so they clean up the connective tissue outside the blood-brain barrier. And then you need still something to mop up the stuff in the brain. Sometimes we use Russell Jeffries' protocol on deep penicillamine that's been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, but we can use the self-hydrolytic amino acids. So NAC works, D-L-methionine works, glycine works. So we use a cocktail of those to mobilize on a deeper level. In my German teaching, we use freeze-dried goat whey. Goat whey has all the amino acids in perfect composition that detox. And so freeze-dried goat whey makes a perfect match, so chlorella in the gut and goat whey to clean up the connective tissue. And when you do parasite treatment, you don't want to really add in anything else. So we do the enemas, we add in the herbals, later on the medical drugs, and through the entire course we give the binders for the fallout. And this part alone has given us the most successes with autism and with all the neurodevelopmental disorders in children, like nothing else that we had before. It makes the biomedical approach look like a small BB gun compared to this in terms of the results that we see. Okay, so I have mixed. We love in adults to inject, to use lipoic acid as an infusion. The trouble with the oral, at least with the traditional lipoic acid or alpha-lipoic acid, is it is used by the parasites as published as a protective agent. So all the antioxidants taken orally are used by parasites first to protect them against the oxidative onslaught of your system. The equation has changed since Chris came on board with the liposomal delivery. If you can have it delivered in a way that it's absorbed long before it gets to where the parasite lives, there's no problem. It's a great tool. And so that has changed the equation. But then it's with the kids. Are they going to accept the sublingual delivery? Many of the autistic kids spit it back out and just refuse to take it. And so I think that it's a place for rectal use of things.
The real small ones will go. The real small ones will go transdermally as well. And so, like that C-lipoic, you can use it for your skin and it stimulates fibroblasts, but a lot of it's going to get through there without having to into circulation. That was when the early work on liposomes in skin, they first didn't like the real small liposomes because they went too far in. They didn't stop at the epidermis, but that gives us a good transdermal route to get the stuff in.
Yeah, I've used the liposomal glutathione with great success topically. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to be really quick now. So
no, we don't want you to be quick, teacher.
So this, this study was done in 1990. Should have ended the whole discussion on mercury in the amalgam fillings. They placed amalgam fillings for 4 days in the jaw of 7 fillings in the teeth of a sheep, and then took them out with suction and all the proper procedures after 4 days, and then did a scan on the sheep a month later to see where the mercury had gone to, and this is what you get. You got the complete penetration of the jawbone of that. Half-life of the mercury in there, 32 years. This is the enteric nervous system of the gut is completely destroyed. Half-life, 32 years. Yeah. So 32 years, you will still see half of this. These are the kidneys of the sheep. It's a spleen. So anyone listening to this, if you ever had amalgam fillings in your mouth for 4 days, you look like this. But those of you who had them maybe for 8 days, or even 8 weeks, or 8 months,
30 years.
you look proportionally. So most of you here in the room will look like the black sheep. And you are the black sheep.
Yes.
And then when people ask us, how long does it take to get the mercury out? It's a lifelong job, because now we're breathing it in, it's in the air, it's sprayed upon us with the chemtrail program. There's mercury in there. We didn't know that until recently. I never suspected, even me, I was too naive to suspect there would rain mercury on us, but they are. And so...
It's in the high fructose corn syrup too.
Yeah.
30%
of it. Yeah.
In the high fructose corn syrup, I didn't know that. But some things
I wouldn't propagate that. I want not measured every source possible, and there wasn't any.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was related to how they were making the lye and the citrate years ago. It may have been in there years ago, but it's not in there now.
Okay, so Chris, as the expert, says fructose corn syrup, from that aspect,
it's got its own issues.
May be safe. You don't need to avoid it because.
I don't want to rush you. I want you to keep going.
But that falls flat at some point.
What would be good is there's a delicious hot breakfast, brunch, lunch on the thing. So if you can quietly and slowly grab a plate, then take your time.
Okay.
Or stay and then go.
So just briefly, what are my favorite tests, to diagnose heavy metal toxicity? Fortunately, we moved forward on this arena at least. We have pretty good tests on that. I like the urine porphyrin test. We do that in France. It's about $60 versus $150 here in the country. That's labbio.net. It's a urine test, so it's easy to do for moms. There's 3 indicators in there, and I like it. You see it for a certain reason. The uroporphyrins are an indicator for aluminum toxicity, and that will show. And precorporal porphyrin is the indicator for mercury, and corporal for lead. So there's some very clear numbers that you get there. It's an indirect indicator, but it's the most reliable that we have so far. Everything else has its place. You know how these tests look like. So I still like to do the challenge test, where we give a chelating agent and then collect the urine. This is not reflecting what's left in the body. It's not reflective of the body burden, but it shows you the quality of things that are in the moment in the circulation and can be mobilized, and how we can, and gives us the indication how we can support the system where it is. This is the urine porphyrin test. So this was one of my autistic kids. There's a number, these are reference ranges. So this kid, on the corporal porphyrin, remember, that's the indicator for lead. The number was 405. The upper limit is 200, so it was twice normal. Precorporal porphyrin was 18. The upper end of normal is 9, so it was twice normal. And uroporphyrin 1 and 2, the indicator for aluminum, was 37. Upper end of normal is 20. So, and of course, at the time I didn't know, so I treated the kid for lead and mercury, and it got better, but not well. And then when I revisited this thing 2 years ago and kind of said, oh my God, you need to be on horsetail tea, silica, citric acid, and so I put him on that. The kid did the other 20% that it didn't do before. So it's important. We have all these challenge tests, DMSA, DMPS, calcium EDTA, penicillamine, desferal. There's the intravenous options. I like to not treat kids with intravenous anything, because I think they respond really well. Since we have Parsite, the liposomal delivery system has pretty much replaced the IV stuff for me. I use a lot of neural therapy, that means superficial injections, where we inject DMPS over the organ that's most compromised, over the areas where the compartmentalized mercury and lead is, with huge results. Very often I do the whole spine to get the release of mercury.
If you do the muscle testing, you put it on the acupuncture, that's great.
Yeah, and then me and my friend Ara developed in 1991 this procedure where we adapted some dental equipment where we can inject, put a hole in the jawbone and then inject the DMPS into the jawbone. And that is phenomenal, how much mercury is stored in the jawbone 60 years after the fillings, or 20 years after the fillings are out. and in a 60-year-old patient, 20 years fillings out, and the jawbone is still spiked with mercury, and that's a reason for the loss of a lot of dental health, because mercury in the jawbone leads to progressive degeneration, first of the teeth, and then the gums, and then ligaments, and the jawbone, and all that. So I'm going to skip over a few things. Also, here's an article on curcumin being a very potent agent to protect from further mercury poisoning. So I think, if tolerated, everybody should be on curcumin. We use curcumin because it has a combined effect with the parasites, by having the ginger in. Chlorella and metal binding, a huge number of articles, lead, mercury, cadmium, uranium. Here some articles on methyl mercury, that using chlorella increases the excretion of methyl mercury. In an article that I wrote together with Mercola. And okay, and then the last bit, number 7, that's the last thing, is just the Lyme disease with the co-infections. I said enough here at other think tanks that Dana had organized, so I'm just going to skip over it. Important to know, the bullseye rash only appears in only 25% of people that have Lyme disease ever had a bullseye rash. Less than 25% ever had any joint problems. So if you make the bullseye rash and the joint problems the criteria of your diagnosis, you're missing 75% of people. That is in the literature. The most important article on Lyme disease to date is from Judy McCloskey, where she proves, like a sharp detective, that Alzheimer's disease is the consequence of the spirochete infection in the brain. And we know that there's no illness that is more similar to autism than Alzheimer's disease in terms of pathology of the brain. And nobody has dared to do brain biopsies on living autistic children, but the evidence is very, very clear that at least 80% of the kids with autism really have Lyme disease, and it's in the brain. But they have all the other things. When you have Lyme disease, Lyme shuts down the detox pathways, which may be compromised to start with. It blocks them down further, so the kids with Lyme become bioaccumulators of toxic material everywhere in their body. And as a response to that, they grow parasites. And so it's a question of where you start. I start on the toxin end and the parasite end today, and ignore the Lyme disease for at least 2 years. And then the Lyme disease is the afterthought at the end. And then only that you also have always worked like that with the Nutramedics remedies. This is a fantastic program, especially for the children. And as long as parents realize it's not either or, we're not looking for a single cause of this, but there is, I postulate there is no autism without Lyme spirochetes in the brain. There's no autism without accumulation of significant amounts of toxins in the body, and there's no autism if it's been there for a year or two without significant amount of parasite burden. And if you address those things together, you get the highest bang for the buck. And all of the kids have epigenetic problems. I talked about that yesterday. They're problem regulating their own genome, administrating it properly, responding to the challenges that parasites and infections pose. And they do not have more genetic problems. They may have slightly more mutated genes than the average healthy kid, but they certainly have a phenomenal amount of more epigenetic problems, which we still have trouble detecting in the lab. We have to go look at the metabolome, the metabolic outcome of the distorted protein matrix in a person. And that we can see, that's our normal lab work. That's the outcome of misadministration of how the genes are transcribed and read, and how the proteins are formed, and how the proteins are working. And so I think the future of medicine is going to be to look at the epigenome, at the proteome much more closely than the genome. Genome right now is overrated, the proteome is underrated. The metabolome is everything we learn, is how to deal with the metabolic outcome of all this. And so there's a lot of room of improvement, but in the practical level, we start kids on a detox program that involves trying to correct methylation disorders and some of the things that inhibit normal detoxification, but being cautious with the oral administration of things because they will feed the parasites. And so when I'm forced to use all taurine and glycine and B vitamins and all that, I never do that without at the same time giving a strong antiparasitic whack with it. And so we start there. We focus as much as possible on the rectal delivery of antiparasitics and other medications as well. That is a hurdle to overcome with the parents. Parents from the Middle East, from the Muslim countries, have a harder time with that than us Westerners. It's a really easy thought to overcome for Germans, a little bit harder for Americans, but it's always been possible so far. And then the last step in the sequence of many should be the treatment of Lyme, which then becomes easy. Once you dismantle the house that has been the fortress that has been built around the intracellular infections, they become accessible and doable. Let me just see if I got anything else here. So some papers on artemisinin. Our new tool, I mentioned it yesterday, is the injection of artesunate, which is a fantastic, simple tool for parents because it's a twice-a-week shot in the bum or in the fat. Bang, you're done with your Lyme treatment. If you place it at the end of the treatment, it's fantastic effective. If you do it at the beginning, it doesn't do much. So I've developed a Lyme cocktail, we call it, that does the whole thing liposomally and orally by putting anti-Lyme herbs, anti-parasitic herbs, artemisinin, and various other things together in a blender, blending them with phospholipids, then vibrating it with an ultrasound instrument, and then drinking that. That has been worldwide a huge success. It has helped a lot of people, a lot of kids recover from it. The trouble with that is the taste. There's a bit of a learning curve of how to prepare the cocktail, individualized to the kid, what they can take and how much concentration. But there's a huge success rate with that. So I think I'll leave it there. I don't know.
You want to take any questions?
Yeah, maybe, well, nobody has questions, but if anybody does.
Sarah may have questions. We got this Facebook 2,100 people right here. Do you have any questions from your peeps? Not quite yet?
Not quite yet.
The apharesis, the only reason we're not using it with kids, we had a question about that, and Lisa, because it's only in a few places internationally, it's not legal in the United States without an IRB. So if they're out looking for that, that's why they're not finding it.
Yeah. Okay, I repeat for the microphone. So apharesis is not yet available in the US so far. Parents have to travel to Germany to have that done. And and it's important. I mean, if the kids have absolutely no accessible veins, I wouldn't start there. But if the kid has pretty good veins and is old enough, let's say they're 7 or 8 years old, I think it's a grave mistake not to do it because it can speed up the recovery tremendously.
I spoke to Gus Katsanis in Dallas recently. He said he's actually going through the process of getting institutional review protocol in place in his office to do apharesis in Texas. So there will be a place for some.
Yeah. We also know one other person that's also in the process. So it's coming. The rest of the world is doing it, and so I mean, America is always afraid to fall behind too much. The special interests can protect against their turf, for a while. But if the rest of the world is doing it, eventually we'll have it too, and then usually we do it better than anybody else. So I do expect that to come soon.
Can you comment on rectal insufflation, ozone versus CD?
Repeat the question.
The question is the value of rectal insufflation of ozone. So theoretically, ozone is a stronger oxidative agent than chlorine dioxide, and we have very good results. We have a spa attached to my office, and moms come there, they fill a bag with ozone, put the kid in the bathroom, and squeeze the bag into the rectum and making that the treatment has a lot less side effects than a chlorine dioxide. However, there seems to be something unique to the chlorine dioxide that is adding an effect to it. It doesn't just kill parasites. I still hold the theory that chlorine dioxide also is a redox balancing molecule, or whatever the breakdown is of it.
Well, chlorine will diffuse nicely through the biofilm. To get to the core of the biofilm.
Yeah, and ozone may not do that. So ozone is great, but appears to be on the overall scale weaker. So what we do very often, if people are local, we start with the ozone, and we see very good improvements with it, and then it plateaus out, and then we do the CD, and we see further effects. And the CD, again, I want to say that we don't do CD forever. We may do every other day for 10 days, and then pause for a while, and then go back for 10 days. I think it's a mistake, the current protocol, by doing the same thing every day for 4 years and not reflecting on it.
Do you see parasites coming out with the ozone like the CD? Because I haven't really seen that.
Repeat the question, please.
The question is, does the ozone produce as much parasites as a CD does? No, inherent, when we do the ozone procedure, we like moms to always do either a colonic or high enema first, and then do the ozone, and then follow it with another enema. And if it's done that way, then you do see the parasites, but not just from the ozone.
And can we stop calling everything parasites as a group and start saying long stuff that has yet to be identified for sure? Absolutely, there's parasites in there somewhere, but all of it most likely is a group.
By the strictest definition of parasite, a virus is a parasite. A Borrelia inside the cell is a parasite. You know.
But they're thinking they're fighting some anaconda type situation, and they're struggling, and they celebrate and dance on the table every time it comes out.
But that's called a worm parasite. It would be distinguished from a protozoal parasite, a bacteria, fungus, an intracellular microbe of another type.
But I don't think we even know that. We don't know
what she's saying is a lot of these things are biofilms.
Yes.
And just goop and slop.
Yes.
And everybody's thinking it's these big worms, and then if they don't get them, then they're failing. Well, maybe it's not there.
Yeah, like
as he said, the rope.
And if we call them parasites, they're just going to keep thinking we agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think I defined it, when I talked about the rope parasite. The rope parasite, from what we know, is a biofilm community that has a lot of pathogens in it, including parasite DNA. And so, whatever that thing is, let's call it parasite, but with that understanding, because it's a more simple word. And we have as many kids improve on the CD protocol where the moms never see anything coming out as moms that get attached to seeing things coming out. So whatever comes out may not be the ultimate goal of the procedure. The ultimate goal is the kids actually get better. Start speaking, start
they lose sight of
more
that.
clear. So.
In 1990.
And there is a lot of reason for pausing with the protocol over and over. By the way, I'd like to say something here. One thing that we're depleting with the repeated enemas is butyrate. Yeah, butyrate is the smell of rancid butter. It's a short-chain fatty acid. It's hugely important for brain development and has anti-cancer properties. And so we like to use different forms of butyrate along with any of the enema protocols. And we have to watch out for the folic acid, the folates, and we have to watch out for butyrate because we're depleting those two things with it.
They can also get that with going ketogenic, because the ketogenic diet, for the purposes of lowering seizures, it's the butyrate that they're testing that tracks directly with seizure threshold.
But the interesting thing is phenylbutyrate, which is the most potent form of it, is available as a medical drug. So insurance pays for it. It's an expensive supplement, but it's free as a drug. And sodium phenylbutyrate is fantastic. The adult dose, I think, is 500 milligrams TID, and the children we just downsize that. And so I just want to say, when we do the enemas, what we found, like a lot of the problems parents run into with the CD when that downhill curve comes, they're either not on enough folate, or they've overlooked the butyrate connection. That has to be in the equation from early on, and then we have to see a lot less crashes.
And the kids that ended up in the hospital were classically magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium in the tank. And you cannot be in the tank.
So let's say that again. So it was magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium. Dana says were depleted in the kids that crashed on the CD. Now, I like to say also one thing here. In the 80s and early 90s, through the work of one of my patients in my Santa Fe practice, allergy research produced a liquid vitamin cocktail that was called co-rectal vitamins that we used on all the kids as a rectal enema. It was absolutely fantastic to give the vitamins that way, because it didn't, it was easy to clean out the colon of parasites and have no competition there and get the full absorption there, whereas it's very near impossible to clean out 16 feet of small intestine of parasites. And as the surface of 2 tennis courts, how much do you need to sprinkle on 2 tennis courts to get rid of parasites? And so I feel very strongly that the time needs to come again. The FDA intervened because it worked, and so we don't have the corrective vitamins right now. But it's very easy to make a slew of vitamins and put it in an IV, put it in an infusion, and put it up rectally to tinker with the dosages a little bit. But that's, I like to not go further with this, but it's a thing that I know mothers have explored when the kids refuse to take anything orally. It's the best route of delivery for many of the vitamins, and I think it needs to be revisited.
Don't you think if a kid just pooped and you do a quick little isotonic enema just to get any low-hanging, not quite out of there, and then you insert your supplements that you put in a little bit of fat and put it in the freezer and a little, what we can do is think of cookie sheet, the cookies that they sell in, wrap it in parchment paper and you just slice it, and you got yourself your little insertable thing, and you got what you need.
Maybe one of you is still friends with Steve Levine from Allergy Research, because he would know what the recipe was. Tom.
Microphone.
He sold it.
He did sell it, but he's still around.
On the top.
Oh, yeah.
I'm intimately familiar with the person who used to supply those colorectal vitamins.
Is that you?
That sounds.
But I did have a question other than that comment. I just wanted to be clear. When it comes to, I wanted to know the difference between apharesis that's been around for a long time versus the electrical transfer that you referred to that's only available.
There's plasmapheresis, there's dialysis, plasmapheresis, and apharesis. In plasmapheresis, you throw away a lot of the plasma of the patient and replace it with artificial plasma. Okay. In apharesis, you do not add anything from the outside. It's just the patient's blood goes through a filter system, and all you throw away is a concentrated toxin aggregate. So there's nothing added to it, not even heparin or anything else. So.
What if you make that comment?
He does.
So you make a homeopathic out of the stuff that's left.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
That you chose core energy as your chlorella?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, it's richest in chlorella growth factor. They're enriching the chlorella growth factor, which is really the peptides in chlorella. So it has like 60% peptides of the weight is peptides, and 40% other stuff. And most other chlorellas have like 40% peptides and 60% other stuff. And it's just less of that, you get more of an effect. And people often report that instant sense of well-being with it. But BioPure has the chlorella purinadosa, which is really has a substance in the cell wall that has the strongest affinity for mercury. And so when it comes down to mercury and lead, I prefer the purinadosa for a while. It's a bit harsh on the gut, but it has the strongest extraction properties, and it's in the literature.
Quick question, and that is butter oil is really high in butyrate, is it not? Could it not be something that I've heard it talked about? I think it originated from you, and it was picked up by Louisa Williams about doing rectal suppositories with butter oil. Obviously, Dave Wetzel's products come to mind, but could we not make a kind of, moms could kind of put together their own mineral concoction using butter oil, and that would take care of at least the butyrate issue, maybe. I don't know.
I absolutely think that that's the way to go. But I know the key, filtrate butter has some butyrate in it, but the overall amount is relatively small. However, you can let butter go rancid, and it hugely increases the amount of butyrate in it. Because if you take it rectally, who cares if it's rancid or not? The kids would not take it from the top down. So as long as butter tastes really good, there's very little butyrate in it. As soon as it starts to oxidize, it builds, the butter creates butyrate as a protective agent against oxidation. And so it gets more and more the more rancid it gets. And then there's a tipping point when it goes bad.
Well, the butter oil is liquid, so couldn't you just let it, he has your refrigerator, but couldn't you just let it sit out? It's like ghee, but it's different. It's more, I don't know why it's different.
Well, you can airfry it first, because then it doesn't go rancid. That's why they make ghee.
Yeah,
you need whole butter to go rancid.
You can buy butyrate salts fairly inexpensively in a powdered form and put it into whatever you want to put it in to get in rightfully. So why are we having this discussion?
No, but it's in the recent literature it's pretty clear that butter salts, it's calcium butyrate, sodium butyrate, magnesium butyrate, is far less effective than phenylbutyrate, and it's sort of like just, at least that's where the science stands with it. And since it's available as a drug, we write a prescription. Now that Obamacare, everybody has prescription kind of privileges, and so it's just inexpensive that way. And so we just kind of say, okay, why complicate it? Once in a while, the medical community comes up with a good drug.
The other reason was that butter oil was supposed to help with recolonization of bifidobacteria in the lower colon, so that would be the added benefit. So maybe taking the butyrate salts with the butter oil with the minerals or something, and there might still be some value.
I can just see the headline.
But I don't know when protocol-wise.
No, I think
rancid butter suppository recipe.
But doing the butter oil, with the magnesium, with the potassium, with the phosphorus, if you already know that those things get depleted from the CD animals, thus putting like a bunch of fat soluble vitamins in it would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Do you think they would get absorbed though?
Well, not all of it. Not all of it. But the body is really, really good with that. If it needs something, it senses the frequency of it, it will suck it up, And
can you speak quickly to the
we saw that with the parental vitamins. We had at the time, we had adults, with a zinc deficiency. We give them zinc, we give them more zinc, and we did the white cell studies for zinc, and it wouldn't come up, and it wouldn't come up, and then we gave it rectally, and boom, it was up. So, just kind of know that, the chronic parasite infestation with Giardia, amoebas, toxoplasmosis, whatever the thing is, changes the way foods and nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine, completely changes the picture. Parasites take over and they funnel the food towards themselves, and we're not getting it. We're not getting the levels up, and so changing the route by doing IV. Okay, IV is great, but I don't want to put a 4-year-old on IV. But I have no trouble recommending animal treatment.
Can you quickly just talk about carb restriction, the ketogenic diet with these parasite targeting protocols, and with the ketogenic diet, you get beta-hydroxybutyrate, and I don't know how different that is, but that's what lowers the seizure threshold.
Well, I think one thing I'd like to make clear that when you treat parasites, in general, you want to give them the most shitty diet you can think of. Put them back on gluten and milk and all that.
Oh my God!
Yeah, because one of the problems is that when you actually take all those foods away, the parasites do not have enough food sources in the gut, and then migrate deep into your tissues and invade you. And the shittier the food is, from the McDonald's kind of food, is the perfect food to seduce the parasite to come back. You use it as bait. Parasites come out.
He's talking bait. He's not talking diet.
Yeah. So the bait diet, Klinghart's bait diet, involves taking the worst food of the kids. Of course, that don't aggravate necessarily the bad behaviors, but the foods the kids actually crave. That's the craving of the parasites.
Yes.
That's the foods you want to give them while you have a potent treatment on board. If you don't, don't, but if you do.
But you mean bait and then blast. You don't mean, let's do McDonald's for 3 months and we'll get to that.
No,
that's
all
the same
together.
as the turpentine protocol where they put the turpentine on the sugar cubes.
Not that anyone's recommending that.
Yeah. With the I had a patient that I gave this diet to that was not ideal for the patient otherwise, and gave them the diatomaceous earth at the same time at the beginning of that meal, those meals, and either after the second or the third dose, the patients got massive amounts of worms out of the toilet, got massive amount of worms out of the urinary bladder, got worms coming out of their nose when they blew their nose, and we were only giving diatomaceous earth, which is not absorbed. Okay. My belief is that the worms in the gut said, "Trouble's coming. You better get out of town."
Yeah. So diatomaceous earth is probably overlooked as a potent antiparasitic. Just one warning with that: it does deplete IgA. So you shouldn't give it for a long time. But for a concentrated effort to get parasites out, is a fantastic tool. It's silica, basically. It's what's the formula? So half of the weight of diatomaceous earth is actually silica. So it's a fantastic aluminum binder. So for other reasons, we also love it.
Yeah, I typically give twice a day, 5 days on, 2 days off for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then during the full moon after that.
And how much?
About a teaspoon for an adult twice a day, or a shot sometimes.
That's what we do. Yeah.
What's the concern with diatomaceous earth? Because there's definitely people who don't tolerate it well, and they talked about that it like shreds the.
That's what he's talking about. That it affects secondary IgA.
But they're talking about how they would be getting like whole worms that look good, and then they take diatomaceous earth, and suddenly the stuff's mangled. They feel way worse passing the worm.
Well, it shreds the worm, so it's probably releasing some of the metal.
Yeah. So, having said that, if you've got someone on a parasite protocol, that the worms are coming out whole and they look all nice and vibrant but dead, you're doing great. Don't add in diatomaceous earth.
Right.
But if it starts to slow down, you might want to then up the ante and add in the diatomaceous earth.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's so inexpensive, very commonly I do that. I do the diatomaceous earth early on.
Oh, early on.
Yeah, early on.
It's an incredible.
Before you start killing them.
How are you applying?
Orally. You mix it with a little bit of water. You got to tell the people that are mixing it up to hold it out at arm's length and dump it into the glass and stir it, because the dust that you breathe is very damaging to the lungs.
They're very sharp crystal-like substances under the microscope that can be irritating to the surface of the gut.
Yeah. Under the microscope, it looks kind of like grass burrs or cockle burrs. And so those are rolling, if you can picture this rolling down through the gut of the worm, ripping the gut to shreds, but the mucosa of the gut of the worm is so much finer and smaller than the gut of the human, it has very little effect on the human gut.
So what if we alternated between the McDonald's diet and the ketogenic diet and then paired the stuff? Like really, because the biggest challenge I see with all these parasitic protocols is they decide what they're going to do, and then they do it month after month after month after month. And if we've learned nothing from the world of yeast, we finally learned that you got to change it up, or they just adapt and know how to live in the presence of whatever antimicrobial.
But I think one of the main overlooked thing is this: if you feed somebody a diet that makes the worm happy, the person will feel significantly better for a while before the worms take over more. And if you give a diet that makes the worms unhappy, the person will feel unhappy for a while. And this is the uncomfortable dilemma that we as physicians are in, to walk somebody through that and actually say no, even though the kid is now reactive to what you're giving us. So stay the course, but up the ante on the antiparasitics. And they will get through it quickly and never relapse to where they were before. The moms or the kids that kind of go around in circles, they do better for a few months and worse and better, and they crash and better and crash. They never reach higher ground. Usually it's this issue.
But you're still looking for a good trending data. Yeah. But you're having these blips of, look, we're killing stuff right now, you're going to feel like shit. Yeah. And then you want to back up to a better baseline, a little bit of a dip back up. Yeah. They're missing that backup part.
Yeah, with the nonverbal kids, you
soon to be verbal.
Huh?
Soon to be verbal.
Yeah, soon to be verbal kids.
Just to really
Yeah, viscerally they're challenged.
Yeah, well, they're not able to tell you what's going on, but you know they're acting out. You know, they're having bizarre behaviors, and the parents sometimes get afraid about that because they don't think that's a good thing if their child's acting out. But sometimes it's something you have to go through. You know, like when you have when you're treating fungus, very commonly the kids get really angry and shout and scream and kick and bite and everything else. And then once you go about 3 more days into that that fungal kill off, it all goes away.
Yeah, it's also like really when we treat fungi or yeast, all the remedies that we're using are also mild antiparasitic. So when you may be very effective in killing the yeast, but you get the worms angry. And so the side effects may not be from the yeast at all, but maybe from the bystanders. They kind of get whacked. And so it's a world that we really know very little about. But as physicians, kind of looking at this for 40 years or so, you get a sense and also some practical experience. If you walk through these crises with the patient without backing off too much, they end up on permanent higher ground. And if you don't reach the upward trend, that means you're schmoozing around the parasites, around the infections, around something alive that's in there, that's intelligent, and not getting on top of it.
When the patients get those kind of violent symptoms, I say, don't necessarily back down on your treatment or stop it altogether, but find drainage remedies that can drain the lymphatic system, the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, the brain, the ground matrix, and so on.
Yeah, and the main drainage remedy that we use is enemas. So, but you don't want to, in a crisis, you don't want to put CD in there. You just do a water enema or add some salt in it, and to just get some movements going. So there is, for us, the rectal approach has become the main tool to handle just about any crisis.
Yeah, and I would add, giving the child water every 10 to 15 minutes by mouth, small amounts, because that just keeps the cells hydrated.
Are you using the sodium butyrate orally or rectally?
That's a great thing for the brain, to feed the brain, and of course in autism you really need to do anything you can to feed the brain.
Okay, don't go anywhere yet. We're going to do.
I'm not staying on the CD enemas permanently, but what if you've been doing it for months? You see worms every single day, every single enema, and you feel terrible if you stop.
We got a lot of that.
Yeah. I repeat the question. So, we have a number of patients that do the CD enemas every day. We have one patient who does it 3 times a day. And she's a psychologist. She's in a full-time job, and she can only maintain in a workforce doing full-time 10-hour days if he does 3 CD enemas a day. And of course, it would be a mistake to stop that. It's just a question, okay, if the 3 enemas a day, you still see alive material coming out, that means whatever that thing is reproducing faster, then you can get it out, or at least at the same pace that you can get it out. And if it's the only tool we have, of course we keep that tool, because nobody ever died, as far as we know, from doing too many animals. It's an aesthetic issue, and there may be a depletion of certain things. That's why I'm bringing in the butyrate, and Dana's bringing in a few minerals that are emerging, and we protect people in that way. However, for me, it also means that the synergism of other treatments is not fully utilized, and we were able to interrupt in the patients that are dependent on the enema every day by stepping up the oral antiparasitic program dramatically. Like, people use oral ivermectin that's available in the animal world, that comes in tubes with 600 milligrams. The highest we ever give is 48 milligrams a day, and these are 600 milligram tubes. They take a whole tube, 600 milligrams. This is like more than 10-fold of the highest amount that I ever would use. So we have the chat site on the internet, and they use 600 milligrams twice a week, and that's when the rope stops coming out, and that's when they don't lose the defense on the parasites, because they're conquering the breeding part of it. Also, the GuberRef protocols have been hugely helpful. When people poop out on a CD, everything they do, there's more rope material coming out, and they are feeling better from it as a proof that it needed to come out. The moment they change or intersperse the GuberRef protocols, often it puts an end to it, because you get the breathing places out. These are usually on the fecal stones, and when those come out, they stop reproducing. So there is a, so it's an intermediate stage where their life depends on the animals, and I do not see really ultimately a problem with it other than the aesthetics of it, But it's also a sign that whatever that thing is reproducing as fast as we can get it out, and we want to have a more potent treatment on board, no matter what that is, and no matter, if you look in the literature, you get lost, you take 4 milligrams of ivermectin once, and you're cured of these worms. And this is 600 milligrams twice a week, for weeks on end before you succeed. So the reality of what people need today in the changed environment that we have is very, very different from what's in the textbooks. In the textbook, they're always, at the state of where things were 10 years ago. And these creatures have changed, conditions have changed, and there is a different need for stronger interventions.
But when he's talking about stronger intervention, we need to know that he's not talking about a non-pooping, dark peeing, trending downward for a long time person. So I want to do more questions, but I want you to look behind you or on the screen, and I'd like to segue into you and Lee, or you and Lee and Chris, or whomever. This is something we came up with a group of moms, that when their kids are crashing, how do we troubleshoot through them crashing? And it's not specific to being on a detox protocol or anything else. It's specific to whatever you were doing, you dug a hole for yourself. How do you dig out? And can you just speak to what you see and see if what you change?
I totally agree with the step number 1, poop and drink. Yeah? And no matter what it takes to get the kid to poop. Sometimes it's even medical drugs. I have a lot of tricks from my German upbringing. We use neural therapy. I use bee venom therapy to put bee stings, on the relevant places on the spine to get kids to poop, because it increases serotonin, which is the main neurotransmitter for pooping. So whatever it takes, pooping takes clearly number 1. Okay, this is after breathing, maybe, but it's clearly the number 1 thing. And then the drinking. With the drinking, I would have a lot to say. It's a mistake to tell moms that they should push water on the kids. The trouble with drinking is what you put in is water without minerals and without electrolyte, and what you pee out is water with minerals and electrolyte. And the question is, where do those minerals come from? Where do those electrolytes come from? And so we load every drink up with trace minerals and with electrolyte. And the miracle happens with that the kids actually on their own get thirsty and asking for more. You don't have to push down the drink. So I think that's a big misunderstanding. So when we say pooping and drinking here, it means that it should be natural thirst elicited by having enough trace minerals and enough electrolyte in the water. In adults, we have a simple formula. We say add enough electrolyte until you detect a slight salty taste. And that's the right way. And once you actually start drinking that water, you will never go back to water that's devoid of those things, because it's not natural. Water that doesn't have electrolytes or minerals in it is not natural. And once you actually get used to that, you drink water without it, it tastes like sandpaper. So it goes down and it hurts, because it rips minerals and electrolyte off the mucous surfaces. So that's number 1. And let me see what she mentioned.
Can you overdo, like if somebody's drinking 2 gallons of water a day, is it fine to do that for every water?
I don't know. I know that when Batmanjali's work became sort of popular and people started drinking gallons a day, there were 12 or 15 cases of death reported from people actually killing themselves with depleting themselves of minerals. You simply get a cardiac arrest because you don't have enough minerals on board and the heart stops because it needs a certain calcium level in the blood and so forth. So there's the downside. So with drinking, it's not this. What's not meant here is a super device. Is push the water on the kid, whenever you can. It's really with those caveats. And then let me see what she means with. What she means with number 2 here.
For large volumes of water, I would not exceed 250 milligrams per liter of electrolyte content. That would be a decent rule.
Yeah, thanks. Good. And then number 2 here, of course, is a hodgepodge of different things. Organ support. Honestly, I don't know what organ support is because everybody has a different ideas. For me, that means the liver compression technique that I taught yesterday, the lymph drainage to clear up the venous system here and the thyroid in a purely mechanical way. There's also a brain technique that I didn't show yesterday. So for me, organ support really relates to the kids. You don't need to worry about the growth factors that they have. There's one thing that life gives them, no matter how ill they are, they're still working that system. And so organ support in general for me means that, by actually squeezing out of the organs what shouldn't be in there. And so.
But you agree that there's we probably challenged the organs at this point. The kidneys probably in challenge, the liver's in challenge, the adrenals and the hypo and the thyroid at minimum. So slow them down, get them peeing, get them pooping, do the liver compression technique, do the lymph drainage, get them on a mini tramp. You need to slow them down to support the organs.
And with the body temperature, I go strictly by the wake-up temperature under the armpit. That's a Barnes test. It should be between 97.8, 98.2. If it's not there, we try the iodine, and we use Lugol's iodine. There's 2 types of iodine. Some organs need potassium iodide. Some people need iodine. Some need iodide. And so we give both of these, and we give the selenium, for the conversion of T4 to T3. We try that first. We never give tyrosine. Tyrosine is a favorite parasite food. So when we do amino acid profiles and the tyrosine is low, everybody else in the world gives tyrosine. That's a big mistake. The diagnosis is a patient got untreated or undertreated parasites.
Maybe we're doing tyrosine 6 bath.
Yeah. With
the milk in it. And then
so, but as a last resort, I do not hesitate to put a 3-year-old or 4-year-old on thyroid hormone or natural thyroid hormone until the body temperature comes up for a while. And because like we said yesterday, for each small incremental drop of body temperature, the number of pathogens in the body double, because it disables so many systems in the body that can't mount a fighting response. So improve the digestion, with hydrochloric acid, enzymes, the proper foods, paying attention to the food allergies. Food allergies change from week to week, and so I do agree with Lee and others that the Cooker Pulse test is the most relevant test for the moms, that they check in regularly which foods are raising the pulse rate. They should be eliminated for at least 2 to 3 weeks completely, and which ones don't. And to at least get the diet right in that way. And there's no food allergy test that you can do often enough. It's a mistake to do a food allergy test and then base your food nutrition for years on that result, because it changes from week to week. Not dramatically initially, but incrementally it changes.
And the first level we're talking about digestion is look in their poop. Whatever still looks like what they ate, you got to get rid of it. Or you have to make it a way that you no longer see it in the poop. So that kind of stuff too.
And then there's a point here in enhanced neurovascularity.
Which
and I really don't know what you mean in practical terms with that.
Well, remember that presentation on neurovascularity I did for CCSVI, where it's like hanging upside down by your ankles and bouncing on a mini tramp, all these things to physically move the blood in your system. Okay, so I showed yesterday the manual lymph drainage massage. It's huge for children. So that's neurovascularity. It's a huge thing, and it affects the superior and lower cervical ganglion, the stellate ganglion, which are the master switches, in the sympathetic nervous system to downregulate sympathetic tone.
norepinephrine, the whole stress hormones, everything goes down when you do the stupid treatment here. And so, but there is many, of course, there's many techniques and tricks. This opens the CCSVI when you do the manual treatment here. But jumping on a trampoline, of course, we associate more with getting benefits in your lymphatic system for drainage. But all those things are huge. Let's go to number 3. So the titrated therapeutic trials, I think, is a really huge important thing. That you start on a vitamin-based oil program, and you see what happens. And I can't say enough here that if you're not careful with interpreting what you see, you're going to make mistakes. If you give a child like things based on the lab work, you see it's kind of deficient in minerals and deficient in these vitamins, and you say, okay, well, let's put the kid on this stuff. Usually the depletion of amino acids and vitamins is an intelligent adaptive response of the organism, because it's infected with microbes that benefits from these things. So the body downregulates that, and then giving it is completely counteracting what the body's trying to do. And so we try to, when we give stuff and we give supplements, we like to carefully look what are really the reactions. Is the kid really getting better, or is he getting worse? And if it's getting worse, we hold back. And so in my world, we bring in the antiparasitic regime much earlier. We bring that in before we do the titrated therapeutic trial. So I would, here, my number 3 would be clearly to do the watching the parasites, and dealing with parasites and toxicity to address that directly in simple ways. And then the titrated therapeutic trial, because then you have the antidote.
That could be an antiparasitic. It's just anything that you think makes sense, throw it in, but just a little bit, and see what happens. So that's not supplements. That's stuff that kind of built up over time. I mean, we're digging kids out that are on 57 things, and they've been building them up for 8 years because they started folic acid and it worked like a charm, and they didn't notice it 3 months in, it became a disaster, and it just built. So we're trying to get them to unload and then reload slowly, whatever makes sense. So that's all that is.
And then I totally agree with the sunlight, that sunlight does a lot more than just creating vitamin D. There's a lot of cytokines and interferons and things created in the skin that we need to fight chronic infections and TB and parasites and all that. It just brings our immunity up. But there's a lot more benefits from that. It's just part of our biology that we need to be exposed to natural daylight. And there's, during sunset and sunrise, there is some special times where the light has special healing qualities. But I also would like to say, if there's heavy chemtrail activity, on those days, don't go out. Just kind of know what goes up must come down. You're inhaling it. And if you take a walk in the rain and you feel shitty afterwards, most likely it's because you inhaled a lot of aluminum oxide and other particles. Number 4, address fear and attachment to outcome. I think that's of course like a huge point, that it's not going to be the kid that's in fear, but it's usually the mom and dad, or dad already has left camp, and watches, sort of like this from afar to see what mom is doing to the kid, and just tolerates it without participating. That's at least in the American context the usual picture, and mom is the one who shoulders most of the difficulties that come with this. And so I work early on with the mothers. I put them on the table, they thought they made an appointment for the kid. Usually I have 1 hour appointments. The kids are so simple, I rarely need more than 20 minutes. And then as mom, you get on the table, and I treat mom. And very often we have to deal with exactly those 2 parameters, the fear and the attachment of the outcome, where the moms are so basically, the moms are all in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from having to live with an autistic kid and whatever that comes with, the disappointment with the doctors. They're all in PTSD without getting any acknowledgement for being in post-traumatic stress, without getting any help from any institution. And so we practitioners, we are this institution then, and we have to deal with that. And it's huge to see how the children improve when the mothers improve. You know, and an extreme example is I was teaching once a year. I teach autism in Germany, in Berlin, and I was one of the moms that took leadership of that with a very good website and putting all my protocols on there. And she had a very severely autistic son that I treated over an 8-year period, who became completely neurotypical. And the moment his pediatrician declared that the kid is now neurotypical, and really a good pediatrician. You know, the kid was like, was now 14 or 15 years old, and a week later the mother was diagnosed with liver cancer, and 3 months later she was dead. You know, and this was the mom I begged for the years that I've known her. Please hop on the table. Oh no, I don't need anything. Just spend the time on him. Yeah, and so I don't think children are served really fairly, like, unless moms benefit from treatment. Sometimes the dad, you know, if the dad is involved, they also should be benefiting from treatment. It's very difficult to get rid of parasites in a child if the mom is the host and the intermediate for the parasites. And so we insist in general that whatever parasite treatment we do on the children, that the parents also undergo that. So that's a little bit to number 4. And where's the number
4? Just really quick, what we find is that they have overall fear and attachment, but they have acute fear and attachment to outcome as well. Because often when we have them in this situation where they have to dig out, they've attached themselves to a specific protocol that they think is going to work, and there's been dozens that have come out. And as they start to push it in these kids too poorly, they have acute fear and acute attachment to outcome for that thing that's layered onto this fear and attachment of the bigger outcome. And so I wouldn't go for the bigger fear and the bigger outcome. I would go for the acute in this situation, and then work your way out.
So Dana is relating that there is the situational fear and attachment to outcome, and then there's the bigger picture in the background, a fear-based approach to life. And so you know, when people come to me, of course, you know, sort of they're kind of surrendered to my care, and my care is never monomanic, one protocol fits all. But we start a protocol, and then there is regular checking in with us to determine when we should get off the protocol or when we should modify it. And so no protocol should be rigid. Every protocol should have a natural endpoint, but should also have pauses built into it for time for the system to adjust itself. You know, so we still, the ultimate goal is still to get the system to self-regulate. And so you use a protocol to facilitate that, but then you have to back off to see if the system can run with the challenge that you post and with the new idea. And often we miss that point by babying the system too long. It just needs back and say, okay, you do it for me. You know? And so we need to, at regular intervals, step off the gas pedal, back off, and see how the system kicks in and self-regulates. So that's really all I wanted to say. There is no more points on Dana's chart here. I would like to reiterate here that the main thing is none of this works if the child is sleeping in an electromagnetically contaminated environment. It just does not work. And it does not work if you live downwind from a field, you know, that's regularly sprayed with glyphosate. And so those things supersede every other intervention. And, you know, that the food should be organic is clear, and that there is some skills involved in running the kitchen and the shopping. That is very clear. Now, most American moms have that skill through just there's a consensus reality which is really supportive to eat organic, to grow organic, and to not overcook the food, and to get off gluten. There's other countries when you bring in just the idea to eat gluten-free, the moms completely end up in deep depression and despair because they cannot imagine a life without it. It's like life has ended that moment when you say you have to get off gluten. Yeah, and we're in a fortunate position that way here in the US that there is a consensus reality which supports all this. And there's the one step that we take further is the rectal approaches, the enemas. And there's a building field, a consensus field now that becomes, when the first 100 people do it, they think it's impossible and they can't do that. And then there's the 100th monkey phenomenon. Suddenly everybody, oh yeah, I can do that, where it was like an unovercomable obstacle like even a few years ago. So I think also for us not to miss the point that different things are possible now. And we're and we have to, parasites are constantly developing and evolving and mutating and adapting to the changing environment, and so do our treatment methods have to keep up with that. And of course the smaller things are the quicker they can adapt and mutate and evolve, and the larger organisms are kind of slow in adapting. It takes 25,000 years to make a new gene. Bacteria, it takes 2 days to make a new gene. Yeah. So that tells you who reigns, who's going to win out. We saw yesterday it takes only a couple of billion years to bring things back, to make them good again. So once we are gone, and all the mammals are gone with us, just give it another billion years, they're all going to be back. Maybe we have 3 eyes then and 4 legs, but it'd be similar to what's there now. I think so.
Okay, you have a new slide to discuss. I know how to
No, Dana, why don't you take over from here? Yeah,
well, I need you though. They don't really. You stand there, and I'll stand here, and we'll just talk about it.
Take us through it.
Okay, so we're in a detox protocol.
Do you want to take the microphone?
I think I'm good. We're in a detox protocol, and stuff starts happening that you don't like, right? There's a specific protocol that initiated me seeing these things on a regular basis that were being responded to in ways that I think didn't appreciate what was probably causing the different things. So the exhaustion, nighttime waking, raging, runny poop color, constipation, fever, cranky with red ears and red cheeks, muscle stiffness, cramping, weakness, and seizures we were seeing as a response to these detox protocols. But my response is where I need your facilitation. Let's start on the left-hand side with exhaustion, because I don't think they're understanding. I need everyone to remain quiet, please. Exhaustion, I don't think they understand that exhaustion is a clear sign that you're on ATP, that you're messing at a mitochondrial level, to say it like he says it, and that you're on borrowed time now to pull yourself out of that tailspin. There's no question exhaustion is part of what you're going to see when you're trying to kill these guys, no question. But if there's no other symptoms, rest, nap, sleep, take some minerals. Okay. But if your exhaustion...
By the way, I think it's important to bring a little science in here. So it's a myth when people take DMSA or DMPS or EDTA and they're crashing that must be a mineral deficiency. All the animal experiments, at least I'm aware of the ones on DMPS, have shown you could not deplete an animal of minerals with no matter how much DMPS you gave. And so there is a lot of mythology that, of course, when you remove certain metals, you should become metal deficient with other metals. But that's actually not the case. And so, however, we are interfering on a very, very deep level with our basic biochemistry, and there's going to be shifts on 1,000 of those wheels. And if the patient is exhausted, the main
while doing a detox protocol,
the main thing is you get off the gas pedal with the protocol,
yes,
and you rest if you can afford it, and you try out what it may be that you have to do to bring it back up.
Right.
And there is, of course, 1,000 things. There's herbal things.
Sure.
For me, what's important at this point, usually it's the adrenals, And usually it's like we give them a small course of physiological dosing of cortisol, and that will usually within a day bring them back up. You know? So usually it's the shift in minerals that you create is dynamic, it moves everywhere. And if the adrenals, there's certain places in our body that have a higher turnover and are more sensitive to shifts in this, and the adrenals, the pituitary, the hypothalamus are most vulnerable to that. And so you get off the gas pedal. If you consult with people over the phone, it would be, you know, take 2.5 milligrams of cortisol 4 times a day, maybe a little bit more in the morning, and call us back in 36 hours or so. Most of the time, that works.
How many days would you let exhaustion, no other symptoms, continue? They're resting, they're napping, they're attempting to reverse it by resting the adrenals. They're 5 days in, they haven't let off the gas pedal, they're still exhausted. Then you let off the gas pedal, they're still exhausted. You would consider cortisol probably then?
Yeah. Okay.
So now let's go exhaustion, but with pale skin, won't tan, not good in the morning, but fine in the evening with no dream recall. That person has pyroluria, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that becomes something very different. Now you're in a detox protocol, you're exhausted, and now because of these symptoms, we know that you also have underlying undiagnosed pyroluria, which is a rate-limiting piece of your detox milieu. So now you've got a whole different direction you need to go, so you have to totally back off the gas pedal. You have to research pyroluria and probably play with some therapeutic trials of pyroluria, for pyroluria. If not, go back even further and make sure you're pooping and peeing and all that stuff.
Wouldn't you have already looked at the pyroluria as a foundational thing before you even jumped off into this?
He would have, but this isn't.
Yeah, no, it's just if other people kind of do this, you know, they wouldn't think that way. And so the cryptopyrrole patient is easy to recognize. They're usually pale. They have normal or near normal CBCs. The hemoglobin and hematocrit looks pretty normal, but they look like they're anemic. That's
syndrome.
The Chanadol look, you know, and that's as simple as that. They look like aristocratic, kind of shining through the bluish, you know, aristocratic look. And you know, it's a deficiency of various things, but leading is zinc and vitamin B6 and the dream recall. Now, of course, autistic kids that don't speak, you can't ask them what their dreams were, you know, so you don't have an indicator for that. And the cryptopyrrole.
But with the kids on the spectrum, they absolutely will show you that they do not like the mornings and they will stay up till 3 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. Now that could also be part of the medurinum or ciferanum miasm. They also have that, you know, there could be some epigenetic things that carry forward.
So that would be the kind of thing that if we extended this out from here, exhaustion, these symptoms, but then you research this, you do a therapeutic trial, it doesn't do anything for you, now you're at the point where you've got to find someone who can take this to the next level.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing with this is, you know, to do the KPU test, it's a fairly inexpensive urine test. It's pretty reliable. It used to be more reliable, you know, it's now more popular, so they're taking some shortcuts in the lab.
Why would you do it if they present like this?
Well, you know, it's actually very rare to have a kid that's not zinc and B6 deficient.
Exactly.
So you can also do a titrated therapeutic trial.
I love it. You say
that. Yeah.
I love that. TTT. No, but I think that's missing in so much of this. We say, oh, you need to test for this, you need to test for this. No, for pyroluria, you can do a titrated therapeutic trial, a bunch of different zincs, a bunch of different B6s, see if there's a point, and take them out and say, oh my God, they're getting a tan. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on, because I'm sure nighttime waking. See the balance, but it goes with raging, because did you see that video by Russell Blaylock, where he basically studied, and he does what you do, he shows the research, and he says, look, what we find is when people are raging, they are hypoglycemic. Not long-term, but at least in that moment, they're hypoglycemic. And we found this to be true with these kids. Mary Coyle in New York found a lot of this. So when this protocol, the CD protocol came through, we started seeing a lot of hypoglycemia, or what it looked like. And so if you apply the work of Russell Blaylock, look for, if you think it's low blood sugar, if they're raging, give him something to drink. It's got some glucose in it, and see what happens.
Well, the holy thing is eating the banana at bedtime. Because it's got.
Okay, so just skip right to right.
Yeah.
So eat a banana.
But also, I like to say, from my point of view, the most common cause of nighttime waking that we see is that people sleep in an electromagnetically contaminated environment. That is just.
Okay, so we have to add that here.
Yeah, it's just 9 out of 10 times the real cause.
Okay.
And doing a metal detox program, because metals in the body are the antenna for the electrosmog.
Right.
And it's the metals that are in the extracellular space. And so when you do a detox program, you remove them, but then there is an intracellular burst moving metals out of the cell into the connective tissue. And actually doing a metal detox program, most people underdose the agents, you actually get an increase, a temporary increase in extracellular minerals that makes these children a living antenna for the electrosmog, and they get just much more electrosensitive until the metals really are taken out, which may take a few years. And so when doing a detox protocol, especially if it's metal focused, kids start sleeping poorly. It in general is the electromagnetic environment at night, and that itself creates hypoglycemia. So it's very well known that Mark Havas demonstrated that when you're electrosensitive,
This is a really big point.
You become hypoglycemic.
So either way, we could put right here, nighttime waking, feed a balanced meal at night with fiber, protein, and fat before bed, or simply try a banana and look into EMF.
Switch off the damn fuses. Nobody's going to die from doing that. Right. It doesn't cost anything, and it will
it's a motivator. It becomes
it may take up to 3 weeks before people see the results, but give a 6-week trial of switching off the fuses, and everybody is surprised at actually doing that.
Okay, so they do both of them.
But the main obstacle to doing that is usually the husbands, which never had more than 3 hours of physics in high school and just don't understand it, And so that's the main obstacle in America, is the husbands. I'm not going to switch off,
So the other thing is getting an A1C test. And on our list of things we wanted to buy a blood sugar meter. And just uses it as a tool. So you want to get to where you see symptoms and you can associate a blood sugar reading to that symptom. Because we're going to find some kids that we didn't know that this meant their blood sugar is 57, and we didn't know that this meant their blood sugar is 138. And then I think you start to see that they're doing this hyper trending in their blood sugar, and you're seeing symptoms and behaviors associated with it. So I think they all need to have their doctors recommend an A1C and then get a blood glucose meter to start monitoring. Okay, running poop. A lot of these kids are doing MCT and ocean water on this protocol. We found that you have to do a titrated therapeutic trial of MCT. You have to start very, very slow and work your way up, or you will blow out with diarrhea, which makes it excellent. It's by far our favorite tool for constipation, by the way, is MCT. Just blow them out.
The coconut oil.
Coconut oil doesn't do it as well as MCT. There's something about isolating just the medium chain triglycerides that just, for some reason, I don't know if it kills a bunch of stuff, but it just blows them out. But so when they've got running poop and you're doing these detox protocols, there's something in there that's super irritating, wouldn't you say, to the system? So you have to just back off things one at a time until you figure it out.
For us, for me, I am a recovering homeopath. And so the 9 out of 10 times, and this is really like a no-brainer, when doing a detox, somebody gets running poop, arsenicum album, 30C, will usually fix it within a few hours, even if it's been there for 6 months. That's one of the things that is so predictable.
But wouldn't you say that if a normal person has running poop and they're not doing a detox protocol, you would want to just fix it, right? But when they're doing a detox protocol, you're going to use running poop as a sign that either you wanted the running poop because you're trying to get stuff to come out quickly, or you didn't, and it means you've got to shift something.
Yeah. Usually, there's a couple of ground rules. If the running poop is very smelly, these are unabsorbed fatty acids, and you have to back off the fats and oils. If it's running poop that's not smelly, it's most likely from recirculating biotoxins that have been triggered by the detox program, and they need to be intercepted. And then for short run, you use charcoal, activated charcoal, to intercept that for 3-4 days. And that will always stop it, and it will always intervene on the deepest level by binding up these recirculating biotoxins.
So how about this? What if they titrate down, like, or take some stuff out that they think's causing it, like the MCT or the ocean water first, and then once, if they can get it under control, still do a blast of the activated charcoal to hit a reset button, and then they're ready to, as long as they're pooping every day, go back. Okay.
But the milder version is just Arsenicum album without changing anything. We always try that first, and it works so predictably during the detox program. If that's the one is doing, and you can just keep everything.
So the opposite order is what you're saying. If that creates a situation where it calms your immune system to tolerate everything,
try
then
something
good.
simple first.
Okay.
You know, because
that makes sense.
If it's violent diarrhea, yes, you have to do the charcoal right away as a life-saving procedure. But if it's just runny poop, they have 4 or 5 bowel movements a day, and it's runny and maybe stinky, maybe not, Arsenicum album, and then adding in the charcoal if you need to.
But when you're doing a detox protocol and your goal is to push more stuff out that would normally come out, runnier poo is actually what you're after, because you want nothing sticking to the walls. You want, until the point where it's like irritable bowel, pulsating, cramping, there's something going on that's different than that, then you need to go to this point before they get dehydrated. Okay, poop color, and I don't have any idea. Okay, so we need to tell them what yellow poop is, green and yellow, and so they need to know. And we don't have. Let's.
Okay, so just very quickly, it's pretty simple. What makes the poop have the brown color is the bilirubin breakdown products in the bile. It's a healthy bile flow. So the darker the poop is, the healthier the bile flow through the liver is, the less congested the liver is. The lighter the poop is, the less bile ends up in the small intestine, and the more congested the liver is. And I demonstrated my liver compression technique that works beautifully. Immediately, within 2-3 days, the poop color turns back to the darker brown color.
So instead of this, what we're going to have is a quick little description of what you're looking for with the bilirubin. It's associated with liver. Do liver compression technique until brown, or if it doesn't work, a daily liver compression technique for 2 weeks. You got to figure out what's going on.
Then you have to. Then the next step is to bring the cholagogic herbs in, the herbs that increase bile flow.
Okay.
The main one is globe artichoke. That's very clear now in the literature. Dandelion works.
Dandelion root or
then both.
Okay.
But people just putting dandelion leaf in a salad. If the kid is eating salad, just going out in the garden, picking some dandelion, putting it in,
and put it in meat.
That will immediately increase the bile flow and darken the poop. So the lighter the poop gets, the more urgent you have to take maybe some lab work. If it gets really light, you got hepatitis, you got a complete obstruction of the bile ducts, and then it needs to be treated in a more serious way. But I've never seen it in 20 years. But we have people watch the color of the poop. Whenever it gets too light, the mom or dad is not doing enough of the liver compressions on the baby.
Okay.
And
so besides the dandelion, the other one was what?
Globe artichoke.
And then there was another one in the middle. Started this scene.
Yeah, it's referred to as globe artichoke as the main thing, and that has succeeded in the literature as being the main thing that really drains the bile from the liver.
So while we're at it, can you just talk about poop, and as far as should it sink, should it float, should it wander, what should it do in the toilet?
Well, the more the poop floats in the toilet bowl, the more fats are in, undigested fats are in there. So it's a sign that either there's not enough bile. So if the poop flows and it's light, there is not enough bile to emulsify the fat so they can be absorbed. But if the poop is dark and floats, that's the pancreas. There's not making enough lipase to break down the fats so they can be absorbed, and that's a hint for pancreatic problem.
Okay.
Which then has to be overcome by giving enzymes.
So give lipase.
Give lipase, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so now let's go to constipation. I broke this up because this particular protocol has, during a full moon with aggression, I wanted to break that out. We also need to add there during a, what's the other one, the full moon and the new moon, because they're finding it's as different as coffee enemas and CD enemas, what they're finding, that everybody thought it was a full moon, but what they're finding is that the new moon is almost as big of a deal, if not just a different big deal. Okay, so during full moon and aggression. And why I'm saying this is because my solution is coming from the assumption, based on what I was reading, that if you've got full moon and you're doing a parasite protocol and you have aggression, there's a very good chance that you've got a buildup of dying, dead worms that are full of ammonia, we know that now, that aren't getting all the way out. So the protein in your food and the protein in your parasites are both competing for that urea cycle, for the same thing. So less meat, curcumin, curcusin, turmeric at night, an isotonic enema, and research hyperammonemia.
Yeah.
But the less meat, can you please tell people out there, this is not a figment of my imagination, that meat is protein, and protein is involved in ammonia buildup.
Yeah, so I mean, let's just talk about the constipation. So, of course, constipation is really our main enemy in all the neurological illnesses. And so, if there's constant constipation, yes, you have to upfront kind of get that going. Very often, it is based on neurological problems. You know, there is not enough peptides, neurotransmitters in the gut to create the propulsive movement. And that is usually the end result of a bowel dysbiosis, let's put it that way. Yeah? So the constant constipation is a sign of the other microbes, the Giardia, the amoebas, the smaller animals, the Clostridia, the Klebsiella, the bugs that cause dysfunction in the bowel. But if it is pulsing with the full moon and the new moon having peaks of certain behaviors and also peaks in the constipation, that shifts the thought much more to the possibility that there's larger parasites involved with it, and that the treatment should be adjusted accordingly. Now, it's different in adults. If you have adults, of course, women also have a lunar rhythm, and it could be hormonally related, but not in a 4-year-old child. You know, you don't get the pulsing of the hormone. So that makes it more easy that in a kid we want to focus more on the parasites, and parasites always come with hyperammonia, with too much ammonia, and we treat ammonia with the most effective ammonia binder, which is zeolite. We use ZeoClear from BioPure because it has the right size of zeolite. You know, that there's a lot of research in Europe on that, and zeolite is a double-edged sword. You know, there's zeolites that are not good for you, but to bind the ammonia, there's nothing as good as zeolite, and so you just add that into the equation. Zeolite, different from charcoal or other things, does not tend to constipate people. So it actually extracts what's causing the constipation, and so is an immediate, beautiful tool to do that. And, you know, and we're not hesitating if it's pulsed like that to give a laxative. No, we use Keith stuff, you know, but there's natural laxatives.
The magnesium oxide that keep
magnesium oxide, you know, that
which you're fine with to pulse in to get it out of there. You don't want to keep them on it for the necessary. If they're not pooping, you need to figure out why they're not pooping. But while you're figuring out why they're not pooping, you got to have them poop, and that's the priority. So between the curcumin or turmeric, which is high antioxidant, at night to feed that BH4 cycle to handle the ammonia, then you're also coming in with the less meats, the isotonic enemas, and all the other things you said, and we should be able to handle this situation when they're doing detox. Okay, now between the moons with no other symptoms, I like the light relief. You have other, it's a far infrared with red, it's a pad, it's $100. I took it to my dad who had been in a nursing home with a broken leg. He got like 5 days. I said, I think we could probably handle this. I'll bring my tools. He put that sucker right, because what people don't realize is the neurovascularity piece of this whole thing, which is when you have a belly and then you have a waistband and then you have a spot where everything's just blocked right there, and you never think about it. I had him release everything, put the light, literally 20 minutes later, he was running to the bathroom, and stuff came out that you knew was from like 1976. It was just...
Let's go back to this. So next one is the fever.
Okay.
You have one there. So
you're good with this left-hand corner right here?
Very good.
Totally good. Okay.
Yeah.
And you like the light relief as a tool for sure.
Absolutely.
Because that's on our list, short list to buy.
We had a similar instrument. When I had my little electronic computer.
I remember.
We had a little
the light relief shield, the light shield.
Light shield. It's the same.
Yeah. Only it was a prototype, so it cost. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going around the right-hand corner to fever. What's your upper comfort level for fever before you want him to do anything? And what I mean by that is here's what's going on in the Facebook groups. Oh my God, my kid has a fever of 103. You'll get 57 comments within minutes. Put them in a tepid bath. Put cold socks on their feet. All this great advice for lowering a fever. But the bad advice is that they're trying to lower the fever at all when you could pay to have fever therapy.
Well, I think the most important thing to know is the fever, of course, is a double-edged sword. That when we raise the body temperature, the body detoxes and the body kills off a lot of the viral load that's there. So the advantage of a fever is does both serve detox intracellular and serves the elimination or reduction of the viral burden. The only downside of a fever is that once in a while, maybe 1 in 1,000 cases, the fever represents meningitis or encephalitis of a bacterial nature, and then it would be a mistake not to lower the temperature. But in fact, these kids die unless the diagnosis is made early on, and it's usually recognized with a stiff neck and extreme pain, in the neck or in the back of the head. And if that's combined, if the fever is combined with a severe headache, you have to sort of think that way it's a possibility. And usually it will take a blood draw to get a CBC, and when the white count is 30,000, this is bacterial meningitis, and you need to be on an antibiotic. I want to say that here.
Sure, absolutely.
And however, the socks and the cold pack and none of these things have ever prevented meningitis from happening. Right. So there are procedures that prevent the fever from going up and burning off the viruses, and you're losing this precious tool. And
so you're not saying because you have meningitis, you should treat the fever. What you're saying is your fever may be an indication you have meningitis, which it still would be a disaster to treat the fever, but you have to seek guidance as to what it might really be. At what point would they have to do that? After 24 hours?
I like people to have a small selection of homeopathics. I mentioned the Arsenicum album in the 30C. I like people equally to have some belladonna at home. Belladonna is the treatment for fever when it tries to make a decision, am I going to become meningitis or not? Belladonna will prevent that step. And so it's usually, we have more sophisticated, it's usually I like the 20X, which is not available. You can only get a 30X or 12X, there's nothing in between. But I think a 30X or 30C of belladonna should be the first response in an autistic kid who can't really express themselves, because we don't know. And it does prevent very often from bacterial infections to affect the brain, and so it's a safeguard. I'm very comfortable with a fever of 103. When it gets to 104, I want to just definitely check the neck, make sure the neck is not stiff, and the kid, if it's holding the head or so, that's time then to head for the ER, to have it checked out. But it's such a loss, so if a kid can have a fever for 24 or 36 hours of 103, it will lower the viral burden at least by 90%, and many of them permanently. And so it's a chance, but like any chance, with a certain risk attached to it. And mom and dad need to make that decision together, and it's best to learn, on the internet now, just the signs of meningitis so they don't get overlooked. Largely it's a stiff neck, sort of.
Genetic. So if you have a kid who's not verbal, and you can sense that it's located in the neck, or that they're crying, or any of those extra things.
Well, and with meningitis, they become somnolent. That means they stop complaining. They become just deeply sleepy, and that's sort of when you start worrying, is a fever coming down and they're healing, or have they gone into this
wouldn't the fever be spiking too? Would it be trending up that whole time?
If the fever is trending up and they become somnolent, that's a danger sign. But if the fever starts coming down and they become somnolent, that's a sign that they're healing. So, so there's those.
But then we have the cost of benefit on the other side. I mean, 99% chance it's not going to be bacterial meningitis. 99% chance that fever is going to be highly therapeutic to your child if you allow it to run its course.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
But I would like to say here one more time that homeopathy, even though it can shorten the fever and keep it at a ceiling of, instead of going to 105, maybe at 103, does not stop the antiviral effect of it. So homeopathy is the only treatment I know where it can make this run of the fever more comfortable for everybody without interfering with the healing effect of it.
Well, I'm going to actually pull the American Academy of Pediatrics position on this. They had it deeply, deeply in the literature because they studied it. I think the temperature was 105. But they did the studies and they found that, look, you know what? When we treat fevers under 100, 105, we have this, and this. So I'll find you those papers, but then they don't share it because they don't want them to actually do that. Okay, cranky red ears and red cheeks equals low PST, phenylsulfotransferase enzyme. You know that one, Rosemary Waring. Lower phenol exposure, take an Epsom salt bath, MSM and sulfur, slow down, and molybdenum.
Yeah, this one, I mean, I agree with all those points.
Okay.
But in general, red ears, if they're there for a longer period of time,
chronically.
It's a lymphocytosis in the accumulation of lymphocytes and eosinophils, and is one of the telltale signs of parasites in the gut. It's one of the key signs that we look for, suggesting that this kid has undertreated or untreated parasites. And then all the other things here are true that you have in there, but they only are true against the backdrop of the parasites. So the parasites are the deeper level.
So again, we're detoxing and we're targeting. Here's what's happening. We're detoxing. They're going along. They're doing all this stuff. They give them some cranberry juice. They have no idea it's a problem. All of a sudden, you got the flaming red ears, flaming red cheeks. They're tearing up the house and beating up their mom, and they're saying, do more. Instead of recognizing that, whoa, wait a minute, we're out of this enzyme. We've got to give more of it. Okay, muscles.
Yeah, so a difference there between the chronically red ears, that's the parasites, and the ones that are completely normal and then sudden flare up. That's of course much more related to an acute allergic state. That needs to be treated accordingly to what you have written down here.
Okay, so muscle stiffness, cramping, and weakness. If it's acute, mild, and transient with no other aggravations, so we're saying a little bit of cramping like your typical person might get for sitting funny, increased minerals in general, and especially topical magnesium, Epsom salt baths. But if it's a new symptom, it's a severe, uncomfortable, stuck, it is actually called decorticate rigidity. This was your patient that was on a fabulous protocol that abandoned that protocol to do what they were told in a book and ended up with decorticate rigidity. That's commonly a postdictal state. From the seizure moms that I've hung out with, it's a postdictal state in chronic and acute magnesium and multi-mineral deficiency. When you get their multi-minerals and their mag back up, it stops happening postdictally. So we learned that. There's 4 of us that together learned that. So, but when you take a kid who's never had a seizure and has the kind of seizure that creates a postdictal decorticate, minerals become your only target. Don't you think?
Yeah. And in fact, I didn't know about this, and so I think it's a very, very important thought. I do know about the rigidity, when we see rigidity, we think minerals. That's always been true. And then always becomes a mineral delivery, and I do feel that the Epsom salt bath is the holy grail of it all. Also, Epsom salt enemas.
Is that in there?
Yeah. Let's see.
We'll just have to add enema.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So Epsom salts as enemas are fantastic.
And the bugs hate them.
and it may contribute to the debugging of the patient.
And they didn't see that coming.
So this is good.
Okay, so the seizure, slow down, a saline or isotonic enema. If they haven't pooped, relax, breathe, increase non-salt minerals, because a lot of them are doing too much of the salinated minerals. And please describe, my experience with seizures is that you have a seizure because you have a damaged spot in your brain that built up electrical activity. Something was stimulated to build it up more and then to release it quickly across. That's the only thing we know for sure about seizures. So when you have a seizure, it tends to mean, if you're in a detox protocol, you have pushed farther than you want to push, but it doesn't mean what you're doing is a disaster. I don't find.
Well, there's many things to say. So first of all, the seizures in psychiatry are observed. The psychiatric patients that get a seizure is often followed by long periods of normalcy. So it's a kind of a built-in electroshock therapy.
Yes.
So it's a self-administered, self-created electroshock therapy. In many cases, we see more commonly in the kids that the seizures are a sign of yet undetected, undertreated larval stages of parasites, which are in the brain. And so it could also be indirect, that the larvae or the migration of parasites and the immune reaction of cross-reaction to certain areas in the brain. So we can never tell for sure, is it the parasites in the brain or are these cross-reactions? And my long-term treatment of seizures is a radical long-term antiparasitic protocol, which has always worked so far.
So it's not go to the neurologist, get an EEG, and get on seizure meds that don't work, so add another layer that doesn't work, so get to the third layer that doesn't work, and then never be able to dig yourself out. Yeah.
And since we're in California and I'm in Washington, I think the new treatment modality using extracts of cannabis is so successful and so gentle at the same time that parents have to know that if they have a kid who has grand mal seizures or temporal lobe seizures, that the treatment with CBD is symptomatically by far the most gentle and best treatment in the world without any long-term downside, and it gives us time to detox the brain and to get the creatures out of the brain, the Lyme disease and the Bartonella and the things that tend to settle in the brain, the viruses, and clean that up while the kid already does not have seizures. And so I think that is the correct approach, and I think in the current political state that we're in, it's for the first time possible actually to speak about this.
And do you think the hemp-derived CBD will meet that need, or does it?
No, the CBD alone is not enough. It takes some THC to prime the receptors in the brain.
Because you have these cannabinoid receptors, and don't you think it's acting as a neuroinflammatory, and that's what's relieving the inflammation, so it's relieving sort of the pressure on that spot where the seizure is. So we're not going in and quieting the brain activity. We're going in and we're releasing the inflammation, which is going to make all this stuff work better. Yeah. And then the other thing I want to say is, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but as a mother who's hung out with a lot of seizure kids, the worst outcomes we have ever seen are the moms who freaked out because there was one seizure, go in, get an EEG that suggests abnormal brain activity on a kid that otherwise looks pretty normal. They medicate them for fear that they will have another seizure, and now your work just got really cut out for you because. So my point is, be ready for cycles, because you can't let a cycle go. You got to come in there with some Mercury or some Ativan, something to break the cycle. But But
also, I just want to defend my colleagues here. So the teaching in the past was that you have a seizure, it destroys millions of brain cells, and the more seizures you have, the more destruction of the brain. And that has actually a while ago been proven to be wrong, a wrong assumption. And so it's very often better to let the kids have a seizure so things normalize, and we just often we observe when the kids have the seizures, their whole health steps up a whole step that they don't lose afterwards, and then we know it was a good seizure. But if the seizures are too frequent So then,
disaster.
of course, we need to intervene, and we need to use all the tricks in the book. I do think that CBD with a little bit THC is the way to go. Short of that, to just treat the individual occurrence with Valium is a very decent treatment.
So they need to have it. So if you've had a kid who's had a seizure, get some rectal Valium, either 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams, depending on weight. Have it in your refrigerator so that you don't have to panic, because that's exactly what they're going to do in the ER when you get there, to get them to calm down and get out of their seizure. So if you can avoid a trip to the ER, you can avoid the whole cascade that comes with that, which in our case included being kidnapped by hospital.
But we can also, like...
Oh, and come close if you want to talk.
Prophylactically, we can also increase the calming neurotransmitters. We're giving some glycine and taurine.
With the
and maybe some liposomal GABA, and try that out to see if we can stabilize the brain.
Absolutely.
But on the long run, I want to say it again, getting the metals out of the brain, getting the parasites and viruses out of the brain, getting the Lyme disease out of the brain is what cures this. And it's in reverse order. When kids have seizures, it is indicative that some of these things are present in the brain, and it should become a long-term goal to get them out, no matter what the method is. So
whatever you just said, God said, yes, teacher, clean up. And that was how I learned. That was how I learned so much about seizures. Watching my son was, if we were doing something that was pushing detox, I thought, you know what, this one's okay. I know, we're almost done with the squeezing of the lemon here, but I want to finish. So what you did that led up to the seizure, you went to Disneyland, he ate McDonald's, he was way overstimulated, hot, hadn't peed. That seizure was bad. Not that it damages more, but that seizure you caused by what you put that kid through. But when you're doing these detox protocols and they're trending in the right direction and you get a seizure, it's okay.
Okay. We tell people before we engage in the parasite protocols what it may do, that somewhere in there it may get a seizure or two, to not panic, because when you actually threaten the living thing that's in the brain with a biochemical intervention, it may express its unhappiness about this in that way.
Yeah, and there's a clarity that you see after a seizure that you don't have. Come talk about the recall healing seizure.
I wanted to say, a patient of mine,
so
her daughter, grand mal seizures, talking to her, grand mal seizures, diastat rectal, and she used sacred frankincense, and it worked better than the Valium.
And it's got the cannabinoids. Did you know that? Frankincense has cannabinoids or something like that.
I learned.
Terpenes. It has terpenes.
She just put it on the forehead. She said it worked better than the rectal.
It's the terpenes that the marijuana has that the hemp doesn't have. The marijuana has some terpenes that frankincense has that isn't in the hemp. Okay, so I feel like I've squeezed. Daniela said I've squeezed my lemon too much, but I squoze. I made him start at 9 o'clock last night, and what is it, like 1 in the afternoon? Almost 2. Is there anything else to do?
No, that's good.
But can you just, yay! If you want to say anything about this while you're eating, if you want to talk about this one, I think it'd be good.
While you're eating. Oh, give it. That's very. No cheese.
I did it once with a margarita in his hand.
The price that you have to pay that I go on camera, and I do it instead of eating.
Let's do it after eating.
Okay, we'll do it after. Okay, so thank you. Crystal, I know you're laughing your butt off right now, and you gotta I'm sorry you peed in your pants.